Hello and oh, my camera's off. Hello and welcome back to the Game Dev Show. I'll be here on video in just a minute, but I've got Jason, Andrew, Johnny, and Paul here. Sorry, my camera battery died right as the stream started. That was perfect freaking time.
He's not lying. It was literally working perfectly just before we pressed the button. Promise.
This is the downside. I forgot I had switched back to being unwired, and I'm on a battery now because I moved my camera over. I'm going to move it over again in just a second once we get through some really quick intros. So I wanted to say hi to everybody out there who's watching or listening to me and watching everybody else. And say thank you for joining. Please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, share the stream. We're going to be taking a bunch of interesting questions today, I think. Assuming you guys have interesting questions, but I'm sure you do. And we'll be talking about a couple little topics that I want to discuss. And I don't know exactly what Johnny's got, but I've got to pick his brain about a couple things too, I think. So welcome again, everybody. And thanks for being here, guys. Anybody want to jump in and say hi while I move my camera around?
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Hey.
Jason's got a new look. You got a different angle, going with a new direction in life.
Yeah, you know, sometimes you look too much to the left. You have to start looking to the right, you know. Or to put it another way, I've been using a tripod for a very long time, which takes up about the back third of my office to give it enough clearance space. And Jason Weimann's been suggesting that I get an upgrade to a arm thing that attaches to your desk. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll give it a try. And now I can attach it to the desk. I can clear up all that space, push the desk back, and it's a lot nicer. I haven't quite set it up nicely the way I like yet, but at least it's now, it takes up like a fraction of the space it used to. So it's nice. Also, I could unscrew it and move it around and things, which is a lot more freeing.
Getting things on arms has been amazing. I've got everything on my desk is on an arm except for this like not arm thing right here. And I mean, my desk is still cluttered, but it's not cluttered with stands. It's just got all these arms. So the giant monitor, the laptop, the lights, everything's on. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's a game changer.
These are the arms, right? Jason, this is the one you got. Show everybody.
Yeah, the what do they call it? The magic tension arm or something? It's got a weird name, but yeah.
Yeah, it's these Manfrotto, whatever they are. There it is. The 244. I can't say numbers. All right, I'm going to try to get this locked in and then join you guys.
Sweet.
Yeah.
What's kind of unique about that one over the others is normally they have individual joints and you have to go through and like screw each joint and get it the way you want to. Or there is another one which is their cheaper version, which has like a big pulley lever thing. And so you basically put it in position and then sort of wrench this lever to lock it in place. But this one, it has just one disc you spin. And when you spin, the entire thing goes limp and you can then lighten it up the way you want and then spin it and the whole thing locks. So it's got like 5 articulating points and you can move the whole thing. It's so much easier to work with than all the others. You pay a premium for the privilege, but it's good. Yeah, I'm a fan. In fact, I'm kind of debating getting a second one now because if you get that with the hot mount for unhacking the camera, you can literally just unclip it and clip it somewhere else, which previously I would have to go and unscrew the whole bloody camera. So it's life's easier, you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, look at that.
I figured you're talking about it. I may as well pull the other one over here and show you. You just move it around, lock it however you want with the camera in there, and twist that knob. And then it just locks and stays.
Easy.
It's like magic. Wow, and then the quick release right into here. So you just swap
and I really can't stress, like, having one thing to turn to get the whole thing to lock is quite powerful. The only downside to it, in my opinion, is the unlike using the proper mounts, you don't have a good way of leveling. So there are leveling heads you can get from Manfrotto that sit on top that would like give you the ball that lets you measure where to keep it aligned. That can be a bit hard to eyeball, especially when you're trying to align it. Like you're standing behind your desk trying to position it for your face, but you can't see you because you're not sitting in your chair, so you can't align it naturally. So there's a bit of wiggle room to get it working. But again, the trade-off is, like, from my perspective, about a fifth the space is taken up, which is well worth it.
Yeah, I think for me, for things, if you're sitting at your desk all day long, you know, I sit more in this chair than I am anywhere in this world. So this is like the spot where I'll be willing to invest in quality stuff.
It as much as you can. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. It's I don't need to wash my car, but I want For this monitor.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of having a really nice office setup and having it be perfect so that I'm happy to be in my office. I don't want to go to a place that I hate. Nothing worse than having like an office at work that you hate going into where the lights are all terrible and it's freezing cold or burning hot and smelly or something.
Yep.
It's going to be like the perfect comfort environment and get a lot more work done that way.
Yep.
Only problem is still neighbors. The classic work from home issue. Just it's fine. They're not bad. It's just dogs one side, kids the other, airplanes overhead. There's always something. Always
some construction going on and stuff too. So before we dive into questions, well, I guess I want to give everybody the opportunity to go ahead and start asking questions. If you have questions that you have for any of us, drop them in the chat. I will star the ones that the guys like, and we will answer as many of them as possible. Sorry, give me more words that. But I also wanted to briefly just announce and mention the Mastermind Matchmaking stuff. So this Friday, I'm going to do another live matchmaking thing for the Mastermind groups. If you were looking at it and wanted to do one, but you couldn't do it because this time of day isn't good, maybe you're watching later, you're watching the pre-recorded one, and when we do this live doesn't work. If you can make it Friday night between 6 and 9, we're going to run another Mastermind Matchmaking session. So all you got to do is hop in there and come talk to some people, see if you can find a group that works for your time. So you have a group of other game developers and talk to about game development stuff, get help with things, help each other out, and make some new connections. It's all free, just a little thing, because I think that game developers should be talking to each other. So it's a thing for them to do exactly that, try to make that just a little bit easier for everybody. Outside of that, there was also this treant is still on sale. Andrew's little tree there. So if you want to get a tree, you can check it out. Let's see. How do we pull this thing?
You want to get a tree.
If you want a treant, I'm trying to get the video to play. There it goes. So he's got the awesome tree and it's half off. I pulled this into my game already and started playing around with it. I got the fire version of him in there, running around and kind of fighting people, and it ended up making him super tanky. I put out a questionnaire or a poll earlier this week on YouTube to see what ideas people had for abilities and stuff. I'm trying to figure out like what kind of creature I wanted to be. I figured he'd probably be a tank or something. And then there were a lot of really cool ideas, like since he already has a tree mode, and somebody recommended having him turn into like a static tree that doesn't move and just like buffs and like kind of like a siege mode almost. I thought that would be kind of cool. And then I was going to play with having him like just attack straight down lines and stuff. So I don't know. It's pretty cool. I was just happy when I played with it to see all of the fucking animations too. Like you actually had everything in there that I wanted and none of them were missing. So I was like, oh, cool. I can cast and get hit and do multiple casts. Like there were fast ones and slow ones just like I needed. So that was cool. And then I just really briefly wanted to show some Nature Manufacture assets too. I don't know. Are any of these on sale?
One of right now, no, but one of them is in the bundle that's currently on sale. The one for procedural words.
I didn't realize there was a bundle on sale right now.
That is, if you go to sell, and this is the, I think, sale, and that's also a bundle. Yeah, because this is the sale.
Oh, okay.
For procedural words, and that's also a bundle at top, the mega bundle. If you scroll up, there is a mega bundle. And there is in the last tier, there's LVE, Lava and Volcano from Nature Manufacture.
You know you have a problem when you click on it and go, oh, cool, there's a bundle. Oh, I've already bought it. Damn.
I actually didn't realize this bundle was here, so I'm going to have to grab this one.
Yeah, that's the Lava from Nature Manufacture there.
Nice.
Which will be updated this year into a new version.
I think that was included with some other bundle that I got at some point.
That's possible.
That is really fucking cool.
Yeah, it's a cool one.
Nice. So drop a link to that bundle down there too. I didn't realize that was a bundle. I saw the sale, but I didn't realize there was a second link there. I'm totally blind and oblivious. I gotta get that in there. Cool. So we got both of those, and then it looks like there are a ton of questions already coming in. Do you guys have anything else you want to briefly mention or bring up before we jump into taking some of these questions?
Not particularly. Happy to get into it.
All right. Cool. Let's see. I'm going to start popping some up. Okay, here's one that I don't have an answer to. Maybe Johnny or Jason will know. So as a student looking for an internship, I got a coding test interview for Rockstar Games. I'm really bad with algorithms and that stuff. How should I approach that issue? And my guess is that this Rockstar Games one is probably very algorithm-y. I don't know what that test is, but I know that some of the AAA studios have very old school, like algorithm type optimized write a sort list or write a sort style tests. Some of them have totally different stuff. So what do you guys think on the algorithm side? If you've got to do like brush up on this side, or just general like tips for interviewing for a big company like this, you guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say for like internships particularly, you know, I think a lot of times they'll be like really trying to challenge you and ask really tough and difficult questions that they honestly might think that you won't even be able to get to a solution to, but they really just kind of want to see, you know, how you think through different problems. You know, when they ask you something, do you kind of just like freeze up and say, "Oh, I don't know, I've never done that before," or do you kind of like start thinking through the problem, you know, kind of, you know, ask them some more questions to really understand the problem, you know, how, like, where does your mind go to start kind of piecing together the different parts of the solution. So I think what they're really trying to figure out is, you know, can you like think through problems? Like when you're faced with a difficult problem, how do you break that down? They kind of want to see that problem solving process rather than, you know, you just giving them the correct answer right off the rip.
Yeah, I would suggest, like, I'm bad with algorithms too, personally. I talk about that in my streams a lot because I get into issues where I suddenly can't figure out how to do something. But I always say, I know how to do this. I just don't know the algorithm. And I think in these situations, when you work at Rockstar, when you work at a company, you're not working by yourself. You're working with a team. And when you get stuck and you need help, you go ask a team member. And so I think in the interview, it's completely appropriate to say, I know I need to use a certain algorithm here. I'm not sure I remember the exact algorithm. Do you mind if you just help me out? Because I can't remember it. This is usually where I'd ask a colleague or I'd look it up, you know, and just be honest and upfront and be like, I can learn, I can find the information I need to find and move on. That's important aspects, I think.
I used to do a little bit of a cheeky trick for interviews where I would actively say, even though it's not really true, I would say, hey, do you mind? I like to talk out loud when I'm thinking things through. And they'd be like, yeah, sure. And then it gives you a perfect logical reason to sit there and go, well, I could try it this way, or maybe this, or this. And you can just basically rattle off a whole load of things you do know that may not be exactly the answer to the question, but it highlights that you're engaged in the problem and you understand the moving parts. And that way, even if you don't get to the right answer, they're like, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. So it's a good excuse for you to get a lot of information out there and prove that even if you don't know it, you're like, you're on the ball, you know?
Yeah. You should definitely be doing that all the time, I think, in there anyway. Like you should be talking out loud, not sitting there silently, having them wait for you to talk, because that gets super awkward and weird. And you want to be talking these things out loud and going through them. I also want to just give one little slightly unethical cheat. Most of these game companies, their interviews and tests are just posted online. So if you want to get an idea of what to actually study for and prepare for, you can just Google the tests and you'll probably find a couple versions of it with explanations of it, kind of get a good idea of how to do it. I mean, I think you should make sure that you actually understand the stuff and don't expect that the test is going to necessarily be the same. But especially if you fail one of these tests, if you take a test like this and you're like, oh, I didn't get the interview, do some searching and start looking into what the actual answers are so that next time you can pass those tests. And so that you have that information, because the things on the test, I would say maybe 50% of the time, it's actually important stuff, like things that you probably need to know to do the job. There's always like that 50% that's kind of extra crap because it's like filler, but a lot of it is usually important stuff and things that you should probably know and understand. So go take a look at that as well. I think it's kind of an important part. All right. Let's see, Rockstar game interview. Verbally assault lead developer, flip a table, and steal a car on the way out.
One last note on that one too, just as an aside. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you don't know the answer to a question and you failed it in an interview, always ask afterwards what the answer was. Because if think about it, you're not just there to prove you know things. You're there to prove that you're a valuable employee, and somebody who's curious enough to ask after the fact and sort of go, no, I don't like not knowing the answer. I want to know. That actually tells a lot to the person you're interviewing with. It's a small thing, but it's like it lets me know that, oh, they actually want to know. They're engaged in the problem solving and want to get better. So always make sure to afterwards just say, what did I miss, or what did I get wrong, or how could I have answered that?
Yeah, you can always ask for feedback after, whether when you don't get the job or when you do. I guess you can ask for feedback. How did I do? How could I improve? Generally, people who you interview with are going to be happy to give you some suggestions.
Yeah, and it makes it easier, I think, for the interviewer if you actually ask them, instead of them having to try to call it out. They're not going to call out and tell you what the problems are. But if you ask them specifically, like what you can work on, what questions you didn't have a great answer to, and what kind of answers they're looking for, or what kind of things they're using, or what they would answer, it goes a long way. And it might even get you the job again. It's happened to me before where I failed some interview questions, asked them questions about it, sent them my updated answer later, and got the job the next day. So
yeah, that was actually I did something kind of slightly similar in an interview that I was doing recently, where I had kind of given like a slightly incorrect answer to a question. And then like a little bit after the interview, I just kind of sent like a follow-up email to the person I was interviewing with and said, hey, thanks again for the time. This one question that you asked me was kind of rattling my brain. I think I said it kind of incorrectly. Here's the exact, or the actual correct solution. And just kind of like showed that I did a little bit more research into the problem afterwards. And I think that was like really, really helpful for me in that case.
Yeah, I would expect that to go a long way. Oh,
yeah.
Okay, we got a bunch of questions. I guess I'll start popping up a couple more of them. So let's see, get rid of that one. And then let's see. This one, I'm just going to say heavily. So let's read it real quick. I'm going to make this one fastest. To what extent is a website necessary when applying for junior positions? I think that it's pretty important to have a website or portfolio unless you have some other experience or something that you can show off on your resume. Otherwise, you're going to have a really hard time standing out if all you have is a resume with, I went to school and made some projects and here's some text of it. So I think it's a big deal, especially if you don't have a lot of experience. And it's an easy thing to do. It's a thing that you could probably spend 2 or 3 days at most on setting it up, making it nice and fancy. Don't try to code it yourself. It's just to show off your stuff. It's not an extra learning project. That's one thing to avoid. Don't go learn a new web framework and learn a new language just to set up the website for your portfolio. It should be a quick thing that you do. And then
unless you're applying for a web job, in which case I hate to admit it, but even as somebody myself who for my own websites will happily use templates because it's easier and it's not the point. It's always good to be judicious with your time and resources. If you're applying for a web job and you're using like a Wix web page, then that's not going to look good for you. Let's just make sure if you are going for a job in web technologies, you're using web technologies.
That is a very good point. So here's another one. Do you guys use the resources folder in Unity? Yes, no, maybe?
I have in the past, but not currently.
So
yeah,
I do.
I haven't quite switched over to addressables yet.
Yeah. I usually start off with resources, and then if it's going to turn into something, I'll look at switching to addressables or something. But I almost never use more. There's like 1 or 2 things in there that I want to find most of the time. It's not that I usually fill it up and load a bunch of things from it. I just occasionally will put something in there that I want to find from code easily. But I don't heavily use it, and you should probably be using addressables if you're going to be doing large-scale stuff with it.
Yeah, for me, it's more about accessibility in terms of use. If you deliver a lot of projects to clients, the problem with resources folder is it's a magical string somewhere. It's basically saying to somebody, oh, did you not realize that it has to be in this directory with this name under this thing with this prefix? It's an unknown that has to be either explained or found out later that can cause all sorts of issues, because people are going to be justifiably going to go, oh, let me just tidy the project. I got this new thing and I'll move some stuff around, and they'll break your entire thing. And then you'll get bugs you'll have to fix, and there'll be a whole issue. So I try to avoid that. And even in the case of, I'm doing a current project on Photon 2, which I know is kind of going out the other end of this. It's kind of being deprecated. But for now, something that Uri showed me was that you don't need to actually use the resources folder for Photon, despite how that's their default example. You can make your own pool object and register items into the pool, and so you don't have to actually, use the resources directory. And so that's what I do: is I make an object in the scene. I drag all the prefabs that are to be network instantiated into that, and then you can still call it the same way. You still do Photon instantiate prefab name.name or with prefab.name, and it'll pull it from the pool rather than from the resources directory. So I try to avoid the resources directory where possible. I don't go full addressables yet either on everything. I will on some projects, but even if I'm not going addressables, I still try to use some kind of like in-scene prefab which contains a list of spawnable prefabs or something. That way there's a visual lookup to say what things get randomly instantiated. These ones, not something somewhere in a hidden folder. So
all right, let's go into a couple more. There's so many questions here. I'm trying to get through them. So here's one. Is an indie game dev company better to work at, or is it better to work at like a AAA company? I think that's kind of what this question's asking. Is indie development better than working at a company? So is it better to work solo or at a company for game development?
I like working solo.
You like working solo?
But I think it's personal preference, right?
Absolutely.
I think everybody should probably start at a game company if you can, just because you're going to get a lot of experience. You're going to get exposure to people. You're going to get paid while you're learning. So you're going to get paid on the job while you're learning from other developers. And you're going to have a plan and project and not have to kind of do it all. When you're an indie developer, there's a lot to it. You have to make the game, design the game, make the game fun. You have to promote the game, market it, sell it, deal with all of the businessy sides of it and everything else. So I generally think that people are better off most of the time if they start working in a company and then do their indie stuff on the side, and then eventually take it full time if it's something that they like. But I think that working in a company has a ton of benefits. So something that I would recommend for people that are getting started out, not just going straight into indie development. Unless you already have something going on and a big plan for it. I mean, it's possible, but I think it's a lot harder.
I'm going to get needlessly philosophical with this question because when someone says a phrase like better, so this is an interesting topic. There's something called a Hume's guillotine, and it's basically the idea that there's a bunch of is statements that you can make, like it is raining, it is Sunday, and then there's a bunch of ought statements, like so you should do X or you should do Y. So an example might be it is raining, so you should use an umbrella. But what if you're too hot and you want the rain to cool you down? So the point is, no amount of is statements can ever lead you to an ought statement, because there always has to be something in the middle called your own personal axioms. So you have to filter every is through your own preferences to get to an ought. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. So the point is, if you ask us which is better, it's like, well, we don't know what's better to you. Is it do you value your time, or do you value the prestige of a AAA company? Do you value the money, or do you value getting to work on a project that your friends would be proud to hear about you playing or working on or whatever? Would you be more proud to create your own project, or would you be more proud to work on something with a big team and be part of a community doing it? So that's such a hard to answer question. I would say, though, from a personal value level, because my axiom is, I think all other things aside, making yourself the best version of you can is the one thing that's persistent and beneficial. Like, it doesn't, one way or another, learning more skills and getting better at what you do will work for you regardless of what you choose to do later. It's always better to learn more and be better at what you're doing. So for you personally, I 100% agree with Jason, and I say any big company you can get a chance to work for at least once. Usually don't stay there longer than 2 or 3 years, in my opinion, but work there so that you have that grounding and understanding of scale. Then maybe work at a startup, preferably not yours, for a while, and get a handle on what it's like to be part of a team where you're integrated in what's going on, but you're not having to make the decisions. Then if you have more time after that, work for yourself. And now go to the other side of the coin and start hiring people and learn what that's like. Try to get as many different perspectives on the same thing as you can, because you'll always learn something new from each position. So better or best, hard to tell, but the short answer is, for me at least, best is as much of it as you possibly can. So, and usually that starts with low-level corporate job up to being self-employed. That tends to be the direction.
All right, let's go to a simple question. Somebody wants to know where they could learn some basic Unity syntax, things like the get key down, set active. You guys, what do you recommend as like your default, like very beginner resource for stuff? Like you're trying to learn just the basics of code and kind of the fundamentals, or that maybe a resource for looking this stuff up?
Google. I still will Google things I know are simple, but for some reason I just never remember, and I'll just Google it and you know, Google Unity 3D get key down, and you'll get the forums, you'll get answers, you'll get some examples, and you'll be on your way.
Yeah, that's my go-to as well. I usually take like the first 2 answers or 3. I'll open up all the tabs. I'll look at the first one, double check that the second one says something similar and isn't totally like different. And the third one, just quickly glance, and then I'll take whichever one looks simplest. Like, okay, that looks like the easiest answer. Just make sure that check more than one just in case one of them's crazy and wrong. But yeah, it's kind of the go-to for me as well. All right, here's an easy one. What are the most wanted?
Yeah, and just on that note, I 100% agree with you, but I think it's interesting to point out it's more than just the value of it being a good resource. The truth is, if you're trying to solve a problem, we've all been there where you're in class and the lecturer or teacher is telling you a bunch of stuff and you've got no grounding. It doesn't mean anything to you. It's just, oh, this is the name of that thing. This is the different axis of this. Like, I don't care. None of this means anything to me. And so you don't learn in it without context. And the beauty of doing the Google approach that we're describing isn't just the fact that it's a good resource in general. It's because if you're Googling to solve an exact problem. Even if I gave to you the best documentation ever made, a 500-page document book, which gave you every single line in the Unity collection of methods, that would mean nothing to you, because there's no point for you to know specific functions you'll never use. But if you have a problem, I want to click a button, and then you Google how to click a button and you write the line in, you now have a direct answer to a direct problem, and you can then scale that up and keep learning from it. So the short answer is, don't try to find a resource for everything. Try to find a problem that you have and then solve that problem. And the more you do that, the more that you'll start to intuitively understand these different solutions, and you'll have them next time. So in general, I try not to have the giant, big answers to everything. I try to literally learn over time, and you will end up with a big database of knowledge from experience over time.
I think that was perfectly stated, because it's generally why I like to recommend that people learn through doing projects too. Like, come up with something that you want to build, either something that somebody's given you to build or something that's an idea that you want to build, and go through the process of building that, because you'll start to discover these things and the stuff just sticks. It sticks way better if you actually use it and you're thinking about how it works and why you would actually use it, instead of, like I said, reading a giant book. I've read plenty of big, long code books in the past. Had no idea what half the code meant or what it was talking about or why I would want to use it, and didn't remember very much of it at all. But
in fact, I imagine you're the same as me, where you've bought a big fancy code book, read it, understood the words, not really understood the meaning or why or what it meant, put it away, worked for a few years, had this sort of sense memory of, hang on a second, weren't they talking about this? Picked up the book off the shelf before, reread a paragraph you read 2 years prior, and went, oh, that makes sense now. Because it's not until you have that grounding that it actually has some level of understanding for you. That's happened to me more times than I can count. The entire book on design patterns, I've probably read about 15 times in my life, understanding different parts of it at different stages of my career as I reread the exact same lines and paragraphs.
It's definitely happened to me more than once. So let's take this other question. What are the most wanted jobs in the video game industry? I got my guess on this. Everybody in chat, if you think you know what the most desired game dev job or game job industry in the industry is, drop it in chat too. I'm kind of curious to see if it lines up with what I'm gonna guess. What do you guys think? Anybody want to jump in first with their guess of the most desired, or like what gets applied for the most?
I think probably like game designer or game director would probably be what I would think. But I can say that when I was at GDC a couple years ago, they had kind of like a open booth, like Insomniac had like kind of like an open booth for they were kind of like hiring, and basically like the line for artist was like a mile long, and like I was like the only programmer there. So
Was
So
there a
maybe
line for
artists too.
idea guy?
What was that? Yeah, idea guy.
Was there a line for idea guy? Right.
That was just the whole convention.
I bet that most people want to be the idea guy, so the designer or the director, producer, or something like that. But I bet most of the applications are for developers and artists.
Yeah, it seems to be a common trope that you'll have like a room split up like a you know, like a prom or something, and on the left side you've got all the programmers going, I can't find an artist. On the right you've got all the artists going, I can't find a programmer, and they're just looking over at each other and nobody's talking to each other. That tends to happen way too often.
It looks like the chat agrees that designers are probably the most wanted. It's the most applied for, and it's largely just because I think it's something that's like widespread. Lots of people want it and don't expect that they need any formal training. People generally feel like they have to be a good artist to try to get an art job, or they have to know how to code to get a programmer job. People feel like they have to play video games to get a game designer job, right? That's the general requirement in people's heads. So it's something that a lot of people apply for. I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm sure that they get way more applications for every game design job than programming job and artist job, but they probably get way more underqualified and unqualified candidates.
I truly think it's the most disrespected or misunderstood job in the entirety of games industry. Underneath that is audio in general, anything to do with audio. But before that, it's definitely game design. Yeah. Sometimes there's audio. There's often regularly not audio. But like, it's one of those things where, I'll be honest, I was the same. When you first get into game design, you're like, well, I play games. Of course I understand games. Like, that's, you know, it's like I eat food. I know what tastes good. I can make food that tastes good. That's not, it seems like a logical, fair statement to make. But there's a lot of stuff that you don't realize is intuitive versus not intuitive. And the biggest one is that you can see so many of these online where people have made direct clones of games. Like, there's about 50 million Flappy Bird clones, and same with Mario clones and whatever. But some of them feel good and some of them feel bad. They're using the same sprites with the same character in the same levels. Then why is it that half of them suck? And it's because there's a whole load of just hard to explain, either like learned academic stuff versus the intuitiveness of understanding things. And I've talked about this before, how there's just the entire realm of learning what weenies are, and level design as a concept, and color theory, and even with, like, you could take Mario's jump as the classic example because it's so complicated in terms of, a jump is just, oh, you just add force, it'll move up and down, but it's a parabola, and a parabola is like the airtime when you're doing the arc, but it's not balanced. There's a reason why the parabola has weighted differently depending on whether you're rising or falling. There's different gravity weights. There's different, like, you could take 30 different platformer games. And there's a great website called Dave Tech who's gone and studied this. Dave Tech, he's got a 2D platformer page, and he's gone and like charted every frame of a jump for like 20 different games. And you can see the arcs and see how different character controllers have different peaks, different valleys, different length of airtime, different hold durations. And all of them contribute to the effect of this. And that's from a game design of one feature of one character one time. And then take that to the extreme for every color, every box, every doorway, every sound design. Like, there's so much of a game is the compound effects of all of these different things. And so the idea that someone thinks they can just make a good game with no experience is a level of hubris that blows my mind every time I hear it.
By the way, for everybody that's watching live, if you wanted to enter to win a copy of JetBrains Rider, just choose a racing class or type anything in chat. But if you want to pick your racing class for the fight and have a better chance, type it into the chat window and you'll pop up, and we'll start the fight in like an hour or so. All right. Got a lot of questions popped up there. I forgot which one I was going to pop up next. Oh, here's a simple technical one. Let's do a quick technical one. I need help. I want to create an enemy nav mesh AI that's walking, that when a player attacks, it runs towards it. Otherwise, it just runs in a random direction. This actually sounds kind of like something Andrew's been working on recently, right? You want to take this and just tell people roughly how to do something like this?
I did this yesterday in my live stream. So you got states, first of all. So you got a state system, however you want to set that up, where you got a state where they're just randomly patrolling or running around, and then you got the state where they're attacking. My microphone's just suddenly got a mind of its own, and then you switch between them, you know, so you switch between them. I preferred the way I've been doing it. It's 2 different scripts. So you turn one script on, you turn the other one off, and that one controls the walking towards the player. The other one is the random. For walking towards the player, that's fairly simple, right? Set the destination to be the player and the stopping distance to be 3 meters from the player or something like that. So you got the stopping distance as well. And then for random direction, you just need to find a random direction, right? You just need to, this is where the algorithms we talk about get tricky. I was lucky enough to have Googled a working algorithm pretty fast. And even though I admit in my stream, I have no idea why it works. It works, and it's one line. And so I built that into my utilities class. So now I've got a get a random direction in the direction that the character is facing, but with a certain angle. So you can do it up to 360 degrees. So yeah, that stream was yesterday, and somewhere I'll eventually post my algorithms for that. But yeah, you just need to get your direction to a certain angle and then go set a destination 10 meters away there, you know, and then do that every 5 seconds. So they just go random directions every 5 seconds.
Nice. And it sounds like they can just go watch the video that you did and see exactly how it works if they really want to dive in, right?
Yep, the code is there. It's probably closer to the end of the stream. It's a 2.5-hour stream, so you'll skip through probably. But
and you're going to be streaming again after the show, so I've got the link down below, and be kind of continuing off in there. You might see some of that code, some of that nav mesh stuff in the AI. When you get back in there and start bug fixing and adding more stuff in that same code, possibly.
If someone reminds me, I'll go over that at the beginning.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. So here's a question for everyone. Should I be learning both Unity and Unreal at the same time? How would you go about balancing your time between the 2 engines? It's a shame Yorai is not here too, because he's been kind of doing this. Right? Anybody got thoughts? Is anybody here using Unreal right now, or everybody just in Unity? What's the situation?
Unreal gives me a headache. Whenever I try to get stuff over to Unreal, it's just a pain. I don't like it. So for me, I don't want to use Unreal. I've got instead I'm working with people to do the Unreal stuff for me, the conversions of my assets, but that's only because people want it. I don't plan on using Unreal anytime soon, so I'm just focusing on Unity.
So I'm using Unity and Unreal, mostly basic Unity, and using Unreal the same as Unreal, just moving assets from Unity to Unreal. And I think I wouldn't suggest using and learning them both, because each of these engine has its all quirks and all the changes that you use them, and if you learn both of them, you won't get it into on the junior level. It's okay, but when you're going to intermediate or the senior level, you have to know the problems, the errors, and all tricks that you have to do in this engine. And when you're learning 2 of them, you won't be able to give enough time to the engine that you want. So you could learn basics of them both, but at some point you have to choose and create bigger projects to see what the problems are with the engine, so you can handle them. Because mostly if somebody from the Unity team or Unreal team tells you that there are amazing things that you can use and create your game with them, many of them won't work at the first that you use them. If you don't have enough experience and knowledge to use them, and especially that's possible that you won't even know they don't work until the very end of your project.
What about you, Jason?
I 100% agree. I mean, I was exactly that. In college, I did learn both. I started with UDK. Actually, no, technically I started with XNA and then UDK, and then I moved up to playing with other stuff and then Unity. And so I would say if you are in college, if you have free time, learn both so that you have a comfortable idea of what the differences are and you understand how they work. But you do want to specialize at some stage, because something that I was having a debate in my Discord with people over is this very exact question, where I said, a lot of people underestimate, it's not just about learning the tools and the abilities of like, oh, this is how you do raycast here, this is how you do raycast here. If you use an engine for long enough, you start to know who the prominent content creators are, where to go for certain resources, which assets solve problems you have. And so if you were in a race and you had 2 projects going and you were said, okay, quick, we have to make this, you know how to solve those problems faster. Even though you know the technology is roughly the same, your ability to solve that problem in an engine you know well is 10 times faster. And if something goes wrong, you have a better idea of what it is, because you know Unity has some quirks with Manifest on Android that are going to be a pain in the ass that you have to double check. Like, you know these things already and you'll save time. And when it comes to the point where you're doing it for a career, like I am, I'm like, I don't have the luxury of having fun to learn a new engine in parallel when people are literally paying me to do a thing in time. I need to do it as best of my ability, and then I can, you know, use the tools that I know best. So I would say learn both, and then realistically, if you're in college, you'll eventually find a job somewhere, and then whatever engine they use, lean into that and start using that engine and get better at it. It doesn't matter whether it's Unity or Unreal. I'm not going to shill for either specifically. I will say, I think if you're an indie, you should probably go Unity because it's more accessible for resources and it's easier for multi-platform stuff, and you're more likely to get help from it. That may not be true going forward because there's some interesting parallels with the Unreal is getting some really good documentation. But I would say getting started, you will start with something like Godot if you're really beginning, then maybe not. Switch up to Unity if you're comfortable with C#. And then if you want to go, if you're scaling up, then maybe go to Unreal. But the truth is, engines are engines. Too many people put too much stock on an engine being the thing that makes your game different. The truth is, an engine is just a tool, and you should be able to make whatever you want in whatever engine, providing you have the skill to do it. And that's why I said it's more important for you to gain skills than to evangelize a certain engine. I've landed in Unity. Unity's become the thing I've been using for 10 years. So when I specifically talk positively about Unity, it's because it's the thing I use. This isn't about me saying it's better. It's the thing I have the most intrinsic experience with. Of course, I'm going to have more to say about it. But I have used Unreal. I liked it when I did. And I think it doesn't matter which one you pick. Just make sure by the time you get to professional level, you pick one. So yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah, I'd say when you're kind of earlier on in your game development journey, so much of what you're learning is like learning how to learn, basically like learning how to interact with these different game engines and tool sets. And, you know, you'll find a lot of similarities in between them. You know, a lot of times they're not going to be the exact same way that you do those things, but you know, if you're working in a 3D engine, you know, there's going to be ways for you to move the 3D object. There's going to be different ways to rotate the 3D object. Like, you kind of like, if you expose yourself to a number of different tool sets, you know, you'll kind of start to expect that these things will be there. But then, like, you know, when you get tasked with, say, okay, you know, you need to make a project using this tool set, then you say, okay, like, I know I need to, you know, move and rotate these objects. You know, how do I do this in this particular engine? So it's just kind of like, you know, learning kind of the standard things across all these tool sets. So that, you know, when you do go to, you know, get a job or work on a project of your own, and you kind of have that, like, you know, one specific tool set that you're working with, then you kind of already have maybe a little bit of a head start, even if you've never used that particular engine or tool set before.
Totally. I think you're learning concepts at that point is the big thing. You know, if you're just starting out, there's going to be a lot of just logical concepts you're not aware of. And I think that's the most important thing to start figuring out, because once you understand the basic concepts, it really doesn't matter what engine you're using.
Yeah, and I think it's important to get a little bit of experience with both, like you guys were saying, like get in, know what the editor looks like, be able to recognize, hey, that's Unreal, that's Unity, when you see them up and running, and kind of know your way around. And then whichever job or company you're trying to work at, make sure that you're learning and focusing on the engine that if there is one, that you're learning and focusing on the engine that they're using, if it's Unity or Unreal. If it's something else like a custom one or one of the much less popular ones like Lumberyard or something, then I wouldn't necessarily dive into those. But if it's Unity or Unreal, learn whichever one of those two the company that you actually want to work for is using, and focus heavily on one, learn a little bit about the other, because you can switch back and forth between them. But like Jason said, you want to be really good at the one that you're kind of focused on.
And honestly, like, this is a whole tangent aside from that, but to use the metaphor of languages, I'm not going to pretend it's not hard to learn another language. If you know one language and you want to learn another one, I'm just talking about like, you know, literal English, German, forget about programming for a second. If you want to learn a brand new language, it's going to take you time. It's going to be difficult at first. But if you learn multiple languages, they'll become easier over time, like anything else. But here's the interesting thing. If your goal is to become a novelist and write great fantasy novels, the difficulty and skills of learning a language are not the same thing. And if you learn to write really good fantasy novels and then you switch to a different language, you can transfer that skill, because the point is that the ability to write in a language is almost tangential to the problem of learning to write novels and how to tell good stories and how to be a good novelist. So if you think about it, learning to make a game has got nothing to do with the game engine you've learned the tools to use for. So you can learn to be really good at Unreal, you can learn to be really good at Unity, but they're not going to help you make a good game. But you can learn to make a really good game in Godot or in Game Maker, and those skills will transfer to Unity and Unreal. So treat them as separate goals. If your goal is to be a good game developer, learn to be a good game developer, and try not to focus too much on which engine should I really focus in on, because that's just the tool you're using. So focus on whatever your objective is. If you want to be the guy who knows all the engines, go for it. But to be honest, I think that's a lot less valuable than being good at a job by picking a job and aiming to be good at that one thing, which even if that one thing is making games. In my case, my one thing is being good at integrating different teams and departments. So my one thing is being good enough at audio and modeling and talking to people and whatever, that someone whose job it is to do that will beat me every time, but I know enough of each that I can communicate with the teams effectively. So it may not sound like a specialization, but you'd be surprised. Being able to be broad on topics is a specialization, because not many people can be broad on topics. So it's pick a specialization and be good at that. And I would say if you're trying to make games like most people here are, learn to make good games. That's way more important than the engine stuff. Just focus on the game stuff.
Crap, a lot of questions just popped up. There's a lot of them I want to jump into. Let me scroll up here and find which one was next. Oh, you know, I'm just gonna take the one at the bottom because I'll find the next one next. So this is a question, a somewhat technical one. I think will kind of give people an overview of what's going on with Unity, what's new over the last couple of years. As I'm actually coming from Unity 2018, can anyone summarize what stuff is different? Like what new things they should be using, especially what's the alternative for UNet? So all of the systems that have upgraded, the big changes, things that are like now a main new part of your workflow since 2018, including networking. Do you guys have anything that stands out? I'll talk about the networking part in just a moment, but if you guys have any things that are like big or new in Unity since then that really stand out and feel different to you?
Well, I think a number of things are going to be in separate packages now. Like I think kind of since then, Unity started splitting things out into the different packages, you know, kind of like this person mentioned, the new input system. So that's not something that's basically in Unity right out of the box. You actually have to go to the package manager and kind of, you know, add that onto the engine. So there are a number of things that are now kind of away in the package manager. So if you do want to kind of, you know, add those extra ones into your game, you know, that would be kind of where to go.
Anybody got anything else?
Unity changes every week, so it's very hard to know.
Yeah.
I would say, in truth, if you're talking like just raw recommendations, in general, aim to switch to the new input system. Don't use the old one anymore. That's pretty much deprecated or on the way out. 2, aim to use the new UI system. I don't use it in everything, but it's currently the direction to go. It's more performant. Aim for that. Aim to move in the direction of using addressables. Again, you don't have to jump wholesale in, but it's more performant. It's the new recommended way to do things. So there's a lot of stuff like that where it may be kind of reductive to say, but the truth is the newer stuff is designed newer for a reason. It may not have all the features, but the point is it was remade or built to solve problems that the other stuff had. So I would move in the direction of those extra tools. Networking, I'll leave to Jason Weimann because I'm out of the loop with Unity's current dice roll of where they're going with that. So,
yeah. Well, yeah. Let me jump in on that on the networking side specifically. So UNet was around, I guess, 2018, 2017. I think it might have been even 2016 time. And it was available for free, part of like Unity and built in. Now they've switched away and they went to the LL API and ML API, these different levels of APIs for stuff. And then they were doing a big system there. But then that kind of changed partway through. It's like that, so those all got released, came out, and then they decided to change. And I mean, the change is somewhat of a change. It's somewhat of, I think, a refactor, and a lot of it's just a rebrand and simplification of the system to make it make sense, because ML API and LL API and all that shit, it's confusing and nobody knows what any of it means. So now what they have, and I think it just came out into general availability or an early, I think it might be a pre-release. I think it says like 1.0 pre-1 or something like that. But they've released Netcode for game objects, which is their new version of this system. And I've been using it for the last, I guess it's been 3 weeks. I implemented it about a week into the project that I was building, and it's been a breeze to work with. It's super simple. It just works. I haven't had any issues at all with it. I was surprised. I expected to have problems, and it did a really good job of telling me when I was screwing up. Like, there's a couple little things that occasionally networking libraries will require, like specific attributes and things. And this one just instantly gave me build errors, told me, hey, go fix this, showed me exactly where the tiny little spots where I forgot things. So I would definitely look into that. As for overall big things, Cinemachine is kind of the key camera controller. It was brought in 2018, I think, as an asset. Now it's part of the main thing as a package. If you open up the package manager and look at the Unity built-in packages, you'll see a large list of stuff. There's a whole bunch of new things in there that you can try out. Personally, I don't use the new UI stuff at all. I've played with it multiple times, and I don't enjoy writing web style.
It's clunky. Don't get me wrong. I'm the same. Like that's why I carefully chose the phrase "move to boards," because even I'm not using it for everything because it's just tedious to work with. But there is performance reasons too. But yeah,
I feel like when I was doing a lot of web dev stuff, I would have liked that. But now that I don't do web dev stuff, it just feels like another set of stuff I have to try to learn and keep in my head that I don't want to do anymore. It's easier for me to just drag the shit where I want it and have it work. And I very rarely am dealing with like lots of different devices. But the general UI for Unity, the new one, and especially in 2022, it's quite a bit different too. Like the feel and the look of the editor, most of the things are the same, but it's going to look and feel quite a bit different. And the scene view buttons and all that stuff have all changed.
The icons killed me. For about a month, they changed the bloody C# script symbol icons, and I kept not finding. To this day, I hate the scene one. The scene one looks like an empty file. It used to be a very visually clear, this is a scene. Now it's like, I can't find it. I'm looking at it, and I still can't see the damn thing. Stupid decision.
Yeah, I keep mixing up the scene one with some other one. I'm not sure which one it is. Like, see it, there's two of them. It's whenever I open up Andrew's pack. I think it's an asset pack is what it is. I see the asset pack next to the scene, and I'm like, wait, which one is it? And I got to carefully not double click the wrong one. They have very similar icons. All right, let's jump over to another question. Here's one that's super simple and quick. What engine does Rockstar or Ubisoft use? And somebody answered it in chat already, but does anybody know?
I think that she's proprietary ones, right?
Yeah, and I guess it's the Rage engine. At least that's this in chat. I can't remember. But a lot of I wanted to bring this one up because a lot of game companies still use their own proprietary engines. I think it's something worth mentioning that a lot of these big AAA companies that have been around since the 90s, early 2000s, Unreal was probably not a great fit. Unity didn't even exist. And they built their own engines, and they've been working on and building them ever since. Those are very hard to learn anything about. They're generally not nearly as good as something like Unity or Unreal, but they have a whole pipeline and a whole infrastructure and a giant team built around that engine that really knows it. So it's very hard to transition off of those once the other options kind of became available. A lot of people are switching from custom engines over to Unreal or Unity, but it's a very slow transition, and the big companies are not super incentivized to use it. They put tens or hundreds of millions into their own development and their engines and their pipelines and all that, and changing it is a lot of work and very expensive. So
And not to mention tool development, right? If you've got an internal engine, like think about anything. If you've got an internal anything that you've worked on, over time you'll have pain points and stuff that takes too long. So you'll build tools to make that easier. And you'll keep doing that for years and years and years. And if you've been a developer for 30, 40 years, you're going to have a whole suite of custom map editors and custom asset managers and various different things. And so it's onboarding new people can be quite difficult. So what a lot of those companies do is have very stringent drawn lines. So you might get hired to do stuff with assets, and you might never see the level engine portion of it ever, because unlike a game engine like Unity, where we're all opening the same toolbox and playing with the same stuff, you'll be living in a different tool written by a different developer whose sole job is to spit out a file that's dropped into the real engine that is used by the level designer to integrate their assets or something. So there's like huge, completely different workflows and lines. So those tools, as frustrating as it can be, if you go into a big company and work there for 20 years, you'd be surprised how little of that's transferable skills. You might learn a lot about the people in the industry and the working and how to work with people and project management and whatever, but a lot of the technical minute-to-minute skills, they'll be like super niche to that specific tool or engine.
Although I will say that you start to see now more AAA companies start adopting engines like Unreal, like Days Gone that came out a couple years ago from Sony Bend. They built that in Unreal Engine 4, and you're starting to see more companies announce that they're using Unreal Engine 5 for some of their upcoming games. So it is kind of a transition. I know, I think I did see someone mention in the chat that, you know, a lot of the reasons that some companies like initially went to make these proprietary engines is because, you know, they don't want to have to pay the royalty fees for using those. But then, you know, it gets to a point where, you know, how much are you spending on development resources, building out this engine and supporting it over time? So then you kind of have to, like, you know, do some cost benefit analysis to see, you know, maybe it's just worth it to go ahead and use something like Unreal where, you know, yeah, we have to pay royalty fees, but, you know, they're in charge of developing out the engine. You know, we have probably a support contract with them. And, you know, they can, you know, help build custom things if we need it to.
Yeah, a lot of those decisions were made too back when the royalties were not the same as they are now. Now it's 5% off the top once you hit a limit. It used to be like $1 million up front plus, you know, 5 or 15% or something like that. The percentages were higher from what I remember, and then there was a big upfront cost. So you couldn't do it as like a small developer. You had to have a pretty big investment just to get started with it, and then you had to build your game on top of the engine. So,
although back in Unity 5, it used to be at 1,200, I think, flat rate for the engine for Unity 5, and you could just own it, even for professional projects. But then they very quickly changed their mind on that.
Yeah.
And yeah, probably also the like bigger companies, they'll work out some like specific you know, royalty contract with Unreal most likely.
So let's see. There's still a lot of questions popping up about the layoff stuff too. So I want to just really quickly talk about that and talk about my layoff too, because I got laid off and it was fun when that happened. So they said, "Hi, did you guys speak about how it was confirmed that Unity laid off like 4% of their workforce, around 200 people?" We haven't talked about that yet. And there was another question that came up, like 3 or 4 people asked about the Gagaya demo, because I guess the team for that was completely cut. That was the post that I saw. It was up all over Reddit and Twitter. I'm sure you guys probably saw it too. Yeah, all I know about it is what you guys know about it. They've seen that same post on there. I assumed that it was probably going to happen just because every single tech company that I know of is having layoffs. I know a lot of people working at different tech companies, and they're all having layoffs, and they keep posting. I think Facebook, Meta, whatever, just announced yesterday that they plan on doing a bunch of layoffs too. And I'm not too surprised. I don't really have any specific thoughts because outside of the Gagaya thing getting cut off, I don't really know what happened or what the reasoning was for the decisions that they made. I'm sure it sucks to get laid off, and it sucks to be the one doing the laying off. I know that I just wanted to talk about this too because my first game dev job, I actually got laid off from 3 weeks after I got hired. So I got hired. I moved down to California, got all ready. I was all excited. I moved from Washington to California. I was getting ready to move my wife and 2 little kids down, going into work. 3rd week of work, I find out, oh yeah, where the company is getting bought and we're laying off like half the people, and we already had the list long before you even got hired. So there are people like interviewing and stuff. All this stuff is going on. But when they do the layoffs, like they generally tend to keep it top secret up at the top, and then found out 3 weeks after I got down here, got laid off and went back to Washington. It worked out in the end, but layoffs sucked. I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on this? I mean, I don't have any special insight, so I didn't really have anything to say about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely sucks that a lot of people lost their job, and unfortunately, it sounds like they were initially indicating that they weren't going to have some layoffs, and then they ended up actually having these layoffs. And you know, it is definitely an unfortunate situation, and you know, it's unsure at this point, you know, what the impacts of that will be kind of going forward, because it does sound like, you know, a lot of people from the, you know, engineering side were unfortunately let go during this layoff. So yeah,
it's really hard to know. Like, we don't know any of the like 200 is a lot, but I think the Unity team is huge too. If it was 400,
yeah, but from the indie side though, it's especially jarring when people who have a bit more public profile, like Zero, who is like one of the faces of the interacting with the indie community, is kind of disappearing. That to me is more of a red flag. It's not just that people are gone, it's that the people who have been, you know, the go-betweens for those of us who use Unity on a daily basis, the kind of it's been interesting. I have nothing concrete to say, but I will say, as just personal conjecture, this doesn't surprise me, and I've seen this coming for a while. Not this specific firing or whatever, but I've been slightly carefully mentioning in the previous other streams that I don't like the direction I think they're going. I think there's an interesting look at their intentions towards software as a service and leaning more into enterprise and multiple pies. It won't surprise me if later on they start announcing Unity games and Unity movies and Unity, and just start like becoming kind of like Meta. I have a feeling, based on the acquisitions and stuff they're doing, that it makes sense that they're trying to have multiple revenue streams, and that's fine, makes sense for a company. But for those of us who've always felt like there's lacking stuff in the Unity game side of it, and there's not enough community assistance, having them be spread thinner into more lucrative angles, it means we're not going to get more resources, we're going to get less, and that doesn't fill me with confidence. And all that being said, it doesn't mean I'm going to change engine anytime soon. A lot of people might think, oh, I'm going to jump ship now. The truth is, everything we said earlier still holds true. It's still the engine I know best and I've been using the most, and it's still paying my bills. And just out of some kind of spite or personal disinterest in how the company's decision-making is going, I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot and change my entire career. That's silly. That being said, I am... you know, let's just say I'll keep my options open, and I might be more inclined to look at Unreal a little bit closer than I have in the past. But I think realistically, I'm not going to jump at shadows. I'm going to look at what's there, and I'm just going to be a bit more cautious. And to be brutally honest, I'm going to expect less from Unity directly in terms of content creation and tutorials and guides. But we've got a big community out there. And if I want to learn ECS, I was never going to go to Unity anyway. I was going to go to this guy right here. The point is like I question how much I need Unity to be engaged in that stuff. It sucks for new people where there's not like a direct path and you don't know who to go to and where to learn stuff. But for those of us doing it long enough, we know where to go to find resources. And I don't think we directly need the handholding from Unity themselves.
Let's go over to Turbo Makes Games. Let's drop a link to that in the chat as well. Oh, if I can find the right window. By the way, while I'm doing that, if you're still with us live, make sure that you hit the, or watching it later, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. Come join us. And if you want to enter to win the giveaway, all you got to do is choose a race in the class. I drug them all right in the middle. Just pick one. You'll pop up. You'll see your little character show up. And then, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, we'll start the fight and see who wins a free 1-year JetBrains writer license, like $200 value. My favorite editor, definitely recommend you enter to win it. Man, there's so many questions today. I love it, but it's impossible to keep up. So here's a quick, simple one. Do Unity, Unreal, or any other engines support modding for games? Yes.
But usually you will have to, you know, set that up kind of yourself. Like it's not like something necessarily available right out of the box.
It's not automatic. You do have to write the code to kind of do the modding, and
yeah,
you have to find
you don't
some
get it
good
for free.
examples. Yeah. I find that it's not an easy thing to get into at first, but like building your own modding system. But once you've done one, it's not very hard to understand the workflow and do a whole bunch of them. You just have to get past that kind of first one of figuring out what it is you're letting them mod, whether it's just art, whether it's data or art, data, and code, and then figuring out the pipeline for each one of those things and allowing it. But maybe you should come back next week when Yorai is here and ask, because he's like the modding king, and we'll have all kinds of great information on how to mod properly and how to add that to your games.
Yeah, the unfortunate truth is modding is like a lot of things where there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's literally down to what your game is. And so you might buy some modding kits or stuff on the asset store, but the truth is you're still going to have to figure out your own bundling and pipelines and stuff. The truth is it's just code. And if you want to inject code, all you're doing is reading assemblies. That's like 2 lines of code. You just need to know where to do it and how to write the good architecture to support it. Same with assets. It's just loading files, putting them into the computer, and then running them somewhere or instantiating them. So from a technical level, it's exactly the same as what you're doing. You're just doing it at runtime. The difference is you just have to understand how to build a pipeline to support that. So it can be daunting because there's not really a perfect solution. Another example for this would be things like localization. Localization on the face of it's just change all the text to this other text. It's like, no, it's a lot more complicated than that. And it's going to depend how much work you want to put into for your game or your project. Do you need every line of text localized, or is it just the dialogue, or is it going to be just the UI? And if it is, do you build an entire asset resource lookup system? And if you do, you have to manage that as a separate asset. So it's not that it's not doable, but it is a system that, 1, you need to know what you want, and 2, you probably need to make affordances for early. It's much harder to just decide to have a game that you've built for 2 years and go, let's add some mods to it. Like there's a lot more to it than you'd think at that stage.
Here's another question for you, Jason. How relevant are clean coding, TDD, and solid skills with game dev? They're very into those and write and preach clean code, but game dev interviewers do not seem to care much. And I guarantee that's going to be pretty prolific. You're going to see that all the time when you get interviewed with game dev. So what do you think on this?
Oh God, how long do we have?
Is it important? First, how relevant is it to the actual job? And I guess why don't the interviewers care or ask about it?
So here's the kind of blasphemous sentence that I'm going to say is, as somebody who's known as the clean code guy who constantly preaches it and does videos and stuff about it, you're probably expecting me to go, it's vitally important. Everyone should be, well, you know what? It's not. That's my shocking revelation. And the reason why is because the truth is, the reason clean code and clean architecture and all that stuff's important is for scalability and project management. And in my case, I work with clients who ask for a thing. I work on it for 2 weeks. I give it to them. They want changes. I work on it for a week, and I keep doing that. And that project will often be built over the span of months, then delivered to them, and then they'll bring it back to me. I'll forget about it for a year, and they'll be like, oh, let's add these new features. And I have to extend it and add new features. And they're paying me like the time it takes me to make it. So the more efficiently I can add new features, the happier they are, and the more projects I can take on simultaneously. So for me, using Unity, it's not for games specifically, but for building systems and platforms and museum installations and advertising platforms, various things, I need it, and it's very valuable. Now, this isn't to say it's not valuable at all, but the point of it is to support change in a system, is to allow it to be scalable and to grow well. And here's the hot take. Most games are written once over the span of a few years, delivered, and then never opened again. And sometimes you'll put mods and you'll put extras or you'll add DLC, but even then the people adding the DLC are the people who wrote the code the first time, and they don't mind hacking in some stuff just to make a damn extra couple of characters and stuff. It is only if it's a software as a service style large game that you need to start maintaining your boundary lines for various things. For example, if you're working on a large MMO, there are decisions outside of your control that can drastically change your architecture. For example, I've used this one before. If you built your entire backend database on AWS, it's a very common place to put all your database stuff. But imagine someone higher up in the business starts talking to someone at Microsoft, and they're like, hey, if you use our platform, we'll give you a huge discount on the entire database architecture, and you'll save $1 million over the course of the year. You'll be like, sure. And they'll go down to you as a developer and say, okay, change our entire backend to use Microsoft stuff. They're going to give us lots of discounts. And it's like, cool. give me a year to do that because I have to rewrite everything that's there. Or you architected it right the first time, and then you're like, cool, give me a week, and I'll just migrate over the database repository layer, and we're done. And so that is where the things come into play. Now, for a small indie, not as important, but the reason I talk about it and teach it is because they're just tools in your toolbox. When I say you should learn clean code and test your development and solid principles, I'm not saying you should apply it to every single project all of the time and be really hyper vigilant on everything. I'm saying that if you know how to do that, you can make a logical, fair decision that this time it's useful, this time it's not useful. So you need to know when to use it and when not to use it. I use it a lot more than most, and I will say that I do recommend it more than most people would, because I think that from my perspective, things change more often than you are willing to give it credit for. I think the idea of being able to easily support change is one of the most valuable things you can have in a code base. Some people would say performance is more important in cases, but honestly, like, unless you're building a game which is already pushing the boundaries of the platforms you're on, in most cases, the ability to easily fix, find bugs, to iterate and test is so much more important on a day-to-day level for you as a developer than any, like, you know, losing sleep over a few milliseconds here or there in the code base. You're most likely to lose that speed for issues to do with rendering more than anything else. You're not batching correctly. You're not, you know, you don't have your UI set up correctly. You're doing too much overdraw. You're more likely to lose your performance there than, like, you're doing an extra boundary line in your application because you're calling 2 extra methods and you should be in a call to your database or whatever. It gets really detailed, but the short answer is don't worry about it if you're an indie making your own game. If you are comfortable making games, I recommend learning it so you know when you could and couldn't use it. But the idea that it's not useful in games is just foolish naivety, because a lot of people come from a games-only background and have never had to learn it, so they don't know what they're missing. But then you've got the other end of the spectrum, people who worked in enterprise who go into games and are, like, in tears going, nobody understands architecture, all this code's a mess, why me? And it's like, because they don't understand that the reality is different over there. It's more about speed and delivering of projects and performance than it is about scalability of enterprise software. So the objectives are fundamentally different, and you need to know them both and apply them correctly at the right times. So, complicated question with a complicated answer.
It's also really easy, I think, for enterprise developers to start over-engineering and over-architecting a system to be ready for change, and then not realize that next week design's going to decide that we don't even want that system at all. Like, it took you a week to build something that you could have hacked together in an hour, and then we could have decided we didn't want it. So a lot of the times, just speed to getting something in front of the design team to validate the idea and validate that it's actually going in is really important too.
Yeah, and like, there's two examples of this I have from literally the last couple of weeks that I've been working on stuff. One of them is we're working on a project and we needed to scan a barcode, a standard, like, barcode scanner that shows the values and stuff. And if you're working for a client project, I'm not going to sit there and write my own barcode scanning library. That's insanity. Like, if I just needed to scan a barcode, I've said before, I'm not going to build a farm because I want a salad, right? That's pointless. I'm going to use tools that are there, and I'm going to work on what I want to work on. So you go to the asset store, you find an asset, and you use it. But here's the thing. I don't want to start peppering in this particular implementation of this particular barcode system throughout my code base, because if it turns out it doesn't do what I want, I don't have to undo all of that to then put in something new. So I build an abstraction layer that says the barcode thing. And then in behind one wall, I go, this is this barcode thing, and here's my code that consumes the barcode thing. And then I used it, and it didn't do what I wanted. We're using Vuforia for something. It didn't support Vuforia. It was messing with the camera. So we had to remove it and put a different barcode system in, and that did work. But I could do that in a matter of hours because we have a boundary line that separates our code from the barcode system we implemented. Had I written it throughout the code base, we would have a harder problem to do that. And there's so many examples of stuff like this where one small decision early on can save you massive headaches later. Another one is I'm working with a different company and we're consuming an API. They're pulling down data from kind of like stock data from the internet, and it's displaying on bar charts and fancy stuff. And I don't want to wait until they have an endpoint up and running for me to write the code to test that stuff. So I built a test layer. I wrote my code that consumes a fake API. I wrote that in my code, shown the bar charts and stuff in Unity. It all works. And when that goes online, I write one line of code, replace my test one with the injected real one, and everything works. I don't have to sit in my hands and do nothing until they're finished with their portion of it, because I can draw a boundary line and work on what needs to be worked on. So architecture serves purposes, practical purposes, when you need them. It's not some fancy, you know, gating it to like, oh, we're doing it the right way or wrong. I don't care about any of that. I care about getting work done and it's a tool, and sometimes the tool is useful, sometimes it's not. So learning the tools lets you know when you should or shouldn't use them.
You want to tell everybody what that pattern is called, so you can look it up, where you're wrapping the things in something else so that they can
which one? Adapter, repository? Which one
yeah, like adapter. You should go look that up. So I just give some people some keywords to go search for if you want to see how he's doing that. And it's a really smart thing to do when you're integrating systems. It's the ideal way to go, I think. Unless you're positive you're going to use something definitely never changing and you're never going to worry about it. But even then, you're probably wrong. So.
Yeah, and I said for speed too. Like what I do all of the time is I start by, if I have data that's loading in, like a whole bunch of waves of spawning enemies, I'll write a text file and I'll just write orcs 5-3 or something, 5 orcs every 3 seconds or something like that, and I'll just write a whole text file about what I assume I want to do. I haven't figured out what the real data looks like, but that's in my head as an idea. Then I read that in, do some stuff, spit out the waves, wave spawn. Then later on, when I start to really think about it, I might build a wave class or a wave scriptable object or something, and I will just route it round through there instead. So instead of using the hacky text file, but the thing is, it doesn't even have to stop working until I go and write a giant scriptable object wave system. Too many people spend too long where they'll waste 5 hours writing a system and have nothing to show for it because they're so focused on building the right system rather than writing code, make it work, design it to it's going to be iterated, iterate to a better solution, and keep improving. You should always be adding some kind of value to your project. So there's a lot of practical reasons to understand architecture.
You don't want to spend a day building a wave system and at the end of the day not be able to actually spawn anything.
Right? Yeah. And I've done it the same with everyone else.
So here's a question on learning. I don't know who wants to take this one, but it says, once you've learned the basics, do you recommend making multiple small projects or one medium to big project in order to learn more and advance your skills? So you kind of covered the basics, and I'm going to assume like learned the basics means you've already built at least like 3 or 4 small projects. Small enough, because otherwise you probably haven't learned the basics. If you haven't gone through the process of building a couple small mini games a couple times. So what do you guys think? Would you continue to make more small stuff, or when do you think it's time to jump over to a medium to big sized project in your development kind of early learning?
Yeah, so I'd say the benefit of making multiple small projects would really be to like solidify the existing skills that you have and just like, just like really help you kind of like master those basics and make sure you like, really understand those very well. And you can kind of like, do those in your sleep. And I think there is kind of a lot of benefit of making the multiple smaller projects. But if you do want to do something maybe a little bit more medium sized, I think that's kind of where you get into the territory of, starting to expand your skills a little bit more, making things kind of like interact with each other in different ways that you just might not get to if you're just doing a smaller scope project. I actually am working on a little bit of a more kind of medium scoped project right now, using ECS right now myself. And I think it's been a really good exercise for me, just like being able to implement, a lot of the things that I've made videos on kind of in a more practical sense, and really just, getting those things all to work with each other. So I think that's been really helpful for me.
And is this the first medium-sized one you've been doing then?
This would be like I've done kind of maybe on the small to medium sized ones before, but this is a little bit bigger scoped than that.
All right, and you've been doing it for a couple years now, right? So I want to make sure that people don't try to jump into the medium big stuff too early. Right?
Yeah.
You got to get them out of
It's been a pretty
that,
slow progression. Yeah.
I find that the small, easier projects, the biggest benefit is that you don't have the kind of the built up what's the word? Now I'm losing it. The technical debt, I guess, is really what it is. You don't have all of the existing stuff there, and you have a fresh slate to kind of start over and try new things, learn new different patterns. And you also get the ability to really like broadly try out different stuff. If you build a 2D game, then you build a little 3D game, then you build a turn-based game, you build a building game, you're trying out and having reasons to try out all of the different types of systems and getting a really broad view of the editor. And then you can start to use those things and see where they tie together when you're building the bigger project. So I definitely recommend making a lot of small projects. Probably, I mean, ideally, like half a dozen to a dozen, before you try to jump into something too big. You can obviously time box those down and just work on it really hard and fast, so you don't have to do it for years. But I would do a lot of small ones. What do you guys think, Jason, Andrew, Powell? Anybody got thoughts on this?
For me, the biggest problem with something like that is setting what is small project, what is medium, what is large. Yeah? Because for someone that is, make an example. One of my first project I made in Unity was just simple shooting to the basket. 2D game, you have ball, you shoot it to the basket. I think I made it in 2 months, 3 months, simple game. I think that now I made it test last year. I made it in 1 week, and even with better graphics, better everything. Yeah, so the biggest problem is something that can be small, especially for the people that work a lot of Unity, can be quite a challenge for something different. For example, for me or for Bart from nature, making a scene with nature and optimizing it is a matter of week or two. But for beginner, mostly after a week or two, they will have 20 to 30 FPS and don't know why it's happening. Yeah. So I think small projects are a very good start if you have if you know what you want to do and what you want to accomplish. But after, as you said, half a dozen projects, I think you should go to medium just to see what problems you will have when going into something bigger. Yeah, because especially at the end of medium project, there's a big problems that arrive. Yeah. Most of what I remember is last 10% of project will take 90% of time. And
especially, you beat me to it. I was going to say exactly the same thing.
And especially in medium and in bigger projects, it's a long of time that you will have to do to close the project. Yeah. So I would say after the 6 to 10 projects, small projects, you should do a medium one and close it. Because the closing of the medium project will be the biggest knowledge that you will accumulate from it. Yeah, okay.
I would bite off way more than you can chew right away, and then realize you've done that and go back and make smaller projects. Yeah, well, that's what I did when I first started learning Unity. I wanted to make a big RPG. I wanted to make the game I'm making now, actually, and so of course that was too much. And there is good advice out there saying for your first project, don't make an RPG. Definitely don't make an MMORPG. That's great advice. Yeah, and so I started with a couple smaller projects. It's good to get stuff finished. It feels good to have something finished, even if my first game got taken down off the iOS store because I used a trademarked name. Turns out I didn't know that the word Photo Hunt was trademarked by that company that makes all the bar games, Photo Hunt bar games. And I made a game like that, and it was great to have it out there. It made all of like $100 or something before it got taken down. And but having it out there was good. So I made a couple projects that were small in scale, that were easier to do. None of them were successful, and that doesn't matter. I was just finishing it. And then I said, okay, now I can make my RPG. And I realized, oh, this is going to be harder. Let me make a smaller RPG. And that just took 2.5 years to finish.
Yeah, so. This is definitely a very big, another one of those big topics. I would say here's my brutal honesty, my intervention, I guess, to sit everyone down who asks a question like this. And oftentimes what you probably mean when you ask that question is, I've followed along in about 8 different Udemy courses by now. I have a rough understanding of how this stuff works. Should I start making my dream game that I'm actually really wanting to make, and I'm just waiting till I can give myself the go-ahead to do it? And the truth is, if you followed along on 5 or 8 or 10 Udemy courses, you still haven't even made one small game. You've learned a lot, but that's not the same thing. Because as everyone here has alluded to, that last 10% is where you are going to kill yourself over individual amounts of stress and work in polish and optimization and delivering for platforms and learning how to upload to Steam and learn the requirements for Steam adding Steam achievements if you want, making sure that you're like, there's so many things that'll go wrong. And it's not until it's in people's hands you'll start finding bugs and issues that you never met because you didn't play it the way they did. You're going to have people complaining that you don't have controller support for the things that they want to use versus how you thought people would use it. So the truth is, if you're asking that question, the first thing you should do is ask yourself if you've really made one small game. And I mean, just like was mentioned earlier, you brought it to the finish line. Have you actually made the game through the process, delivered it, put it somewhere on a store, had people download it, and received some kind of feedback from somebody on that isn't your friends or family? Have you gotten to that point? Because then you've at least had the whole journey and learned what the headaches are. Things like getting the pause to work right, getting the menu to work right, making sure your volume slider is using the proper logarithmic, all these like little things that won't matter for you sitting there following along on a course or structure. And even if you do all of that, the truth is every project is going to be minimum 40% more complicated or longer than you think it is, separate from that last 10% issue. Whatever you think the game is going to be, it will be harder because you'll hit some bug you don't understand. Or here's the worst part. You could have a perfect plan for your game. You could execute it perfectly. You could be the world's best project manager. But you might get 80% through your game and realize, oh shit, this isn't fun at all. Nothing about this is entertaining. It does everything I thought it should do, but it actually sucks because you don't realize that all the effort you've put in to programming and art and all this stuff doesn't matter in the face that you didn't learn how to make a compelling game loop, or you didn't learn what game flow is, or you never learned how to apply, you know, how did you draw the player's eye in terms of building guidance for affordances? Like any one thing could make your game not be what you want it to be. And so making a small project doesn't have to be a small project. You don't have to be conceding to that. What you can do is make a really good small project. So pick a small project and make it yourself, or at least even if you do one of those Udemy courses, finish the course, but then stop and go, let's build onto it. Let's add mechanics. Let's add features. Do something to it and release it as a different thing than the course you started with. And you'll have all of those things to learn. Can I make this mechanic fun? Does this mechanic break the game flow? There is so much stuff there that when I think the question of small or medium-sized project, there's no small or medium-sized project. It's like the classic, there's only small or medium-sized people, right? Like you can take a small project and you can make it as complicated as you want to do it. And I would say you're always better taking something small and really pushing the scale of what you can do with it, because you'll have more bandwidth. You could take a small game and make an even better UI and learn all of the cool animations and swishy stuff and learn how to do, like, does your save files have all sorts of like version control? And can you do fun stuff with your saves? There's so much more you can learn rather than trying to do a big project and then like mediocrely doing 50 different things, right? So it's, again, personal preference, but I think you'll end up with a better project you'll be happier with if you make something small and it's so much better than people will anticipate versus making something big and you can smell the cut corners from your lack of experience on all the different areas throughout. So,
yeah, I can add one last thing. It's total opposite of everything I said earlier. I know one person that started his first project as MMORPG and delivered it. Oh. I know that is the bad from Nature Manufacture, yeah, the creator of Nature Manufacture. He created MMORPG game. It's on Steam and it was delivered. So there is this 1 in a million developer that can do it.
What's but the phrase? I wouldn't recommend it. The exception that proves the rule. The exception that proves the rule. Yeah.
Yeah, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Respect.
Yeah, I was going to say there was a question that popped up here, and when you started talking about taking the course content and making your own games, that's something that I generally recommend for like all of my students too, like especially the beginner platformer stuff. Like I always try to get them to take the coursework, take what they've learned, and then try to make their own twist on it. Swap out the graphics, add in some new features and functionality, and build different game. And I'm always amazed by like how different people build stuff. Like people will make shit that's nothing like what I show them. Like I teach them how to make like a Mario style game running around hitting snails and that are turtles, you know, flipping them over and all that stuff. And they build like these crazy puzzles and these it's just like really awesome. Crazy stuff that I would have never thought of totally redesigning the game. So it's definitely something I recommend that you do. You'll learn a lot from that, and I think get a lot of value out of it. There's this question here about somebody who, it looks like Eduardo, just finished an online game dev course with Unity and now want to know how to get a job with no experience. And I think that is probably going to be hard if all you've done is finished the online course. If you haven't done some of the things Jason was talking about after and while you're doing the online course, then getting the job just off of that is definitely going to be difficult. You've got to actually get in there and do some work and build up some of that experience on your own as well, I think. Do you guys have any other thoughts on this? Oh, one other thing I would mention, when you are looking for jobs after you've done all this stuff, you can also look at the Unity certification stuff. I didn't used to recommend it all the time, but then I was part of making the tests and I saw what was in there and I was like, okay, this is actually pretty good. And I've seen HR at companies just constantly checking and recommending people with certifications over and over and over. I don't value it nearly as high as they do, but I do think that there's some value in it, especially if you have no experience at all. It's one of those things that kind of sets you aside. But I think that there are more important parts like actually building games and getting up the experience. Anybody want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I mean, make cool things and share them online. If you can kind of, have somewhere that you can point people to, or if people just kind of, come across, that'll definitely do wonders for you.
And they don't have to be super cool. They just have to be things that you made.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But make sure you did make them, because I've had this problem before where someone has a really impressive demo and you start talking to them and they're like, oh yeah, I followed this course and did a thing. And like, cool. So you really don't actually know what's going on in any of this. And it just that gives me less enthusiasm for the person. If they built a project, show it off, and they can't describe how the collisions are working, they can't describe the system for damage, they literally didn't make it, they just followed along. So at least make sure whatever it is, I would be happier with a smaller project where you can explain it than that bigger looking project that you don't really know what's going on.
Yeah. And I guess along those lines, to kind of go off, my suggestion is, if you're making say a blog post about your project, make sure you kind of go into detail about, what are some of the interesting problems that you came across during development and, how you solve them in a particular unique way. Or, if you're doing a YouTube video, you of course can talk about the same kind of thing, but just kind of don't just blindly throw something up on the internet. Just kind of give a little bit more extra context about, what you did in that project and, why it's cool to you.
Yeah, so to kind of jump on what Jason Weimann was saying, it's like there's two paths to get into that whole prospect. You can either go the academic route where, as Jason said, you get a certificate and you get some kind of certification that you know what you're doing, and you'll have an easier time going through the hiring process where a company has signed off to get people. The other route is you get sort of headhunted by people who find your stuff, and that's a whole different angle, and you'll have a better time doing that if you're active in communities and have public profiles and people see you and want to work with you. Both are valid. Both will equally get you jobs. It's just a matter of, do you want to lean into being really good on paper, or do you want to be really social and get used to people wanting to work with you? So you just have to pick whichever suits your personality better.
And then Anonymous mentioned game jams too as a good way to start. I definitely recommend that. I think they're a good way to get some experience out there, get some projects out there, and get in front of people. Also, if you're willing, a good way to meet other developers and talk to developers. You may end up, on a team doing a game jam and find out that somebody on that team is hiring and you're a good fit for that position, or they know somebody that's hiring, and making those connections. So I always say it's more valuable. It's much more important who you know than what you know, right? It's always the case. And whether it's fair or not, that's definitely the case. Knowing more people, getting out there in front of people helps a ton. There was a technical question, or semi-technical one, about keeping code working and clean. I thought this one would be interesting to go over. And it says, my projects fail after around 2,000 lines of code. They start off fun, interesting, and robust, but then my code gets inconsistent, buggy, and ultimately my projects fail. Any advice on how to make the projects more robust, or how to basically avoid this problem of it probably gets really difficult to work with, really hard to add features and functionality and stuff? So anybody want to jump in on just some real general rules or advice? Because I think without seeing the code, it's probably going to be hard to give really specific advice. But
yeah. I like this question. This is something that I constantly face because I have a tendency to make 3,000 line classes and stuff. And I hear Jason and Jason constantly say, anything over 200 lines, it's too long. Anything over 200 lines,
on my monitor there.
Yeah, and so these are those things that repeat in your head. They're your conscience sitting on your shoulder. And so my thing that I've been trying to do, and if you watch my live streams, you'll see me doing this, is trying to make my scripts skinnier, trying to make them shorter, trying to bring things out of one class where they maybe shouldn't live and put them somewhere else. Try to use code that I can reuse multiple times. And I think it's an exercise, you know, it's a constant exercise that you have to do. You'll get to the point, I think, where it becomes second nature years from now. But until then, it's a constant exercise to remember, oh, yes, is this too long? And then to go back, refactor it, build it, refactor it, build it, refactor, and constantly do this, your own loop where you're making it more concise, more clean, more clear. And in that process, adding comments, cleaning it up, making it more understandable, using the better variables that are more pristine to what they actually do. You know, if you wrote a variable name that later you're like, wait, what does this one do again? Change that variable name so that next time you come back, you know exactly what it does. So that would be my advice, but I'm sure others have more poignant advice on it.
Yeah, but would it be too cheeky to say watch my YouTube videos? Is that a good enough answer?
Oh, yeah. No, I think that's good advice, though. You probably should. And I think what Andrew said is exactly what I do. What I like to do, and if you don't have your line numbers on in your code editor, you're already screwing yourself. So make sure that you turn them back on if you turn them off. I know people who've had them off before, so what the fuck are you doing? That's a terrible idea. But looking to see that when things get big, you start refactoring, kind of like Andrew was saying. I usually stick with that rule of around 200. Once they get to like 400, I'm like, okay, I definitely need to look at this. There's probably something stupid going on here. It's not always the case. Again, like any rule, it's not a hard rule, but it's a general guideline to try to keep things split out and separated as much as possible. And I think that I just want to reiterate that point that you made on the variable naming, because it's the one thing that people screw up. It's so easy to do. If you don't know what it is and you have to figure it out, rename it right after you figure it out. Rename it to what it is so that you'll go back and you'll look at it and go, oh, okay, now I know what that is. And don't be afraid to rename your variables, even if they're the serialized fields. That formerly serialized as things can cover it for you. Just leave that in there for a while and then delete it later. Rename your things and make them obvious so that you know what they are, and then split and separate crap constantly. Once it's working, though, get it working, get it right and everything. And then once you know it's good, then refactor it, make sure that it's still good and working, and then continue on. And I like to do that as like little kind of like almost mini sprints while I'm working. So I might be writing code for a half an hour, and then at the end of it, when I'm kind of done writing the code and thinking for a little bit and trying to rest, I'll start looking at options to like refactor, like, hey, can I clean this up a little bit? Is there something I can do here? And if there's something obvious that stands out, I'll do it. If not, I might move on. But I always just kind of like do a quick reevaluation afterwards to see like, does this make sense? Should this belong somewhere else? Or if I'm about to add a new feature, I'll look at where I'm integrating it and say, does this part that I'm going to integrate it into, does it make sense to integrate it this way? Or should I refactor this and make it easier to integrate with so that it's easy this time and easy all the future times? So.
And something that, like, I'm acutely aware, because we've all been through this journey of learning how to be good at stuff. And sometimes you hear people talk about advice like we're doing and go, oh, yeah, but you've got experience. You know what you're talking about. It's easy for you to say that and it doesn't really apply to me. So I think it's often helpful to give an experience that we've all had and then talk through it that way. So for my example, I think one of the biggest issues with software architecture going crazy and people having messy code is people choosing not to learn from past mistakes. And what I mean by that is we've all done this. I mean, tell me if you haven't, because I'd be very surprised. You've written some code, and when you're done, you're like, oh, I like this. I didn't think I could do this. Maybe after a night of Googling and finding stuff and grabbing snippets, you built a cool system that rotates the way you want or has a really cool arc of firing something, and you're really proud of it, and you like what it does. and then you go on with the rest of your code. And then later on, you come up with a different part of the code base where it'd be really cool to do that same thing again. Maybe you wrote like an arcing turret for one character and you want to do the same thing for another. And then you think back to where that code is and you look at it and go, oh, I'm going to have to like copy bits of this, move it over here and reduplicate all of that stuff because I want that same functionality again. And what a lot of people do is they hate it, they're frustrated, but they do it anyway because they have to. And now they've copied it and hacked it into the second thing. And then surely enough, you work on another project 2 months later and you're like, oh yeah, I did a really good arcing fire thing. I want to get that code again. I have to go and you have the same problem. You have to go and cut it and copy it from all this stuff. So you're being given a red flag lesson from yourself. Going, this thing's valuable. I like it. I would like to be able to reuse it down the line, but you keep treating it like it's something just inherently intertwined in your code. And if you do that, you end up with a problem that we generally call the fear, which is if something works, nobody wants to touch it. If code does what it wants to do, you'll go, this thing is a fragile house of cards, and if I even sneeze at it, it'll break. And so I'm never going to open this script unless I desperately have to. And the more you do that, the more you're afraid to even use your own code. So you don't need to go down the whole fancy software architecture, learn all the patterns nonsense. But what you can do is just ask yourself, how many times do I have that instinctive gut feeling of, ugh, I hate having to open this script or look at this code, or God help me, if there's a bug, I hope it's in anything but that one class. Because if it's in that one class, I'm going to be stuck there for the next 2 hours trying to solve it. And if you have that feeling about your own code, you already know the answer to what you need to do, because if you let it keep going worse, it'll just keep getting worse. So you need to stop and go, why do I hate using this script? Maybe it's because it does 4 things at once. And if I take one of those things, move it out to its own file, and then put it in and say, using new cool, projectile script, and then projectile script.do stuff. Next time you need to use it, you can just grab it and put it over here and reuse the whole thing again. So yes, we'll talk about the academics of how you apply this stuff, but the truth is most people are hitting these walls all the time. They have that experience, but they just ignore it and push it away. So if you just stop allowing yourself to write code you don't want to use, and genuinely is the #1 advice I say all the time, write code you enjoy using. And if you don't enjoy using your own code, ask yourself why, and that's your problem. Everything else is downstream from you writing code you hate looking at. Because if you hate looking at your own code, of course it's going to be horrible to work with. So,
and I will say in the ECS project that I'm working on right now, one benefit of using the ECS pattern is that by nature everything is split up. Like all the systems, they only affect very specific things. So by nature the code ends up being a lot shorter in the class files. You end up with a whole lot more class files, but things have been separated out like really nicely. So I've kind of like gone back and had to change the implementation of some certain things, or if I kind of wanted to add a feature to my project, it's been really nice for me to like change one thing and only one thing breaks. I don't have to like fix a ton of different things. Like I can just go and fix the one thing that it affects, and usually it is a pretty easy change. So that's been a really nice benefit for me there.
But we have a super chat that I don't know the answer to, and I wish Dave was here for. It says, what math should tech artists learn to help programmers? I am a terrible artist and an even worse tech artist. So that's why I said I wish Dave was here, because he is an amazing. Oh, he wouldn't say it, but I think he's pretty amazing at tech art. So anybody have any thoughts on this?
3D vector maths would probably be a good place to start, at least.
My perspective on this is always going to be from a client-facing thing, and so and something I've said many times before. I kind of feel like I repeat myself a lot. No matter what job you're doing, somebody is your client. You're basically building projects or products for somebody. And so in the case of you doing, if you're doing shader work or you're doing whatever, anybody who's worked with a complicated enough shader knows you don't want to be talking to the shader directly. You usually want some kind of script that manages it. If you buy any high quality script on the asset store, that's like a fancy hologram shader, it'll come with a custom script which knows how to talk to that shader, will create the property blocks, do all the fancy stuff for you, calculate sine waves, and do all the fun animations. You want that separation layer. So instead of asking yourself, what math should I learn? Ask yourself, in their position, what do they wish they had? And me as a programmer, if I'm being handed a cool script that does some fading or interesting stuff, I want to be able to call fade equals 0 to 1. I want to be able to not think about whatever the hell is happening behind that boundary line. So ask yourself to write a system such that the public-facing contract for it is clean and easy to understand. So the answer is whatever math you have to do to hide the like noise and the complexity of that system so that whoever's using it and consuming it out the other end gets a nice friendly thing to work with. And that's usually going to fall into the category of vector math, noise calculations, doing Perlin noise and all that stuff, so that the end result can just be like noisy equals true or randomize or some function that could then call a thing that sets different values or whatever. So decide what the end product should be and then answer that question on your side of the boundary line.
All right, Andrew, here's a question for you. For Unity, and I had to pop this one up because you're the only one. Would you recommend Windows or Mac OS? Is that also fine? So what do you recommend for development? What do you use for development? And what do you think people generally use? Is there any downside to using one or the other?
Is also fine. Geez. Well, you know, Unity started on a Mac, so it used to be Mac only. So keep that in mind. But I think
you're saying they learned their lesson. Is that what you're?
You know, it comes down to, in the end, you know, a Mac user is like myself. I use a Mac, and it's perfectly fine. The problem is that a lot of games, of course, are only on Windows. A lot of people who use Windows don't even think about the Mac when they think about games, and it's sort of a catch-22. You know, people don't make Mac games because Macs don't play games, but they do. They do perfectly fine. Problem is that a lot of the technology that some people make in games, and a lot of assets too on the store, some of the like, I know the KWS water system, for instance, doesn't work on a Mac, only works on Windows. But the problem with that is that if you make a game with that, it won't work on a Mac ever. You know, it just won't work. So for me, I want my project to work on Mac and PC because as a Mac user, I've always appreciated the games that work on Mac. I've always loved Blizzard because their games work on Mac. I've always loved, you know, all the games that came out on Mac. And, you know, back in the 90s, when I was a young kid and using a Mac, I always laughed at my friends because while I had to wait 6 months to a year for a game to come out, when it did come out for the Mac, it looked so much better than on the PC. For whatever reason, I guess I don't know why, but so I would say it's fine either way. The reality is most of your money from a game will probably come from the Windows users, not from the Mac users. So if you are making a game that you want to work on Mac and PC, then you know, it doesn't matter what you build it on, just test on a Mac. Get a Mac so you can test. Similarly, I got a PC so I could test and so I could play games. But so I could test and on PC stuff. But this thing doesn't turn on too often because I'm using my Mac for development. And, you know, there you go.
My answer is in the form of that image I just sent Jason Weimann. I think that pretty much sums up my opinion.
Pull it up right here.
Yep.
So it might be a bit small, but basically, and for those listening to his audio, it's distribution of Steam game platform users in June 2021. So all Mac in total combined is about 2 to 3% of Steam users, while Windows represents about 95% of users. So
2 to 3% is also less than the 5% of people who are using an unsupported operating system in Windows 7.
Yeah. So I mean, the question of whether you should develop on a Mac, like, it's academic. It's exactly the same question as if you'd asked me about Unreal versus Unity. Just pick whatever works for you. I don't care. Whatever you have, develop on that. But when it comes to distribution and delivery, the truth of the matter is oftentimes the conversion from one platform to another, Unity makes it a lot easier, but it's still going to be a pain in the ass and cost you months of time. And unless your game is already making enough money that 5% audience is worth it, in terms, like, you do the math, how much would 5% of your current audience be if they bought your game, and then assume 1 out of every 1,000 people buy it? Is that conversion cost of like 2 months of your life or whatever worth it for that level of income? And oftentimes the truth is the answer is no. That's why a lot of games go PC only. You can aim to be multi-platform first, and that will save you some hassle. But the truth of the matter is, what normally happens is people will make a game, it'll be PC only, they'll earn some money. If the game does well, they'll pay some other studio and go, here, take 40,000 and just convert the whole damn thing to you know, Switch or to, you know, whatever other platform I'm building it to, and then they give a certain chunk of that to whoever does the porting for them, and then they take the rest of the income, and that way it's worth it. But in general, if it's a PC game aiming for Steam, it's usually not worth the development cost to go to Mac. But again, developing on Mac, perfectly fine. It's just in most cases, you're not going to be hitting that top level tier on any platform at all. You should be using something like URP. You should be hitting mid tier. You should aim for your game to run on middle tier hardware anyway. So you shouldn't need to have a top of the line hardware of any kind to run whatever it is you're making.
By the way, if you haven't entered the giveaway, I'm going to kick it off in just a little bit. All you got to do is choose a racing class. Your character will appear, and we'll start the fight in a little bit. And the winner will get a 1-year JetBrains rider license worth a couple $100. My favorite code editor. Definitely recommend you enter it. I'm going to minimize that, though, so it's not so huge anymore. Yeah, so, Andrew, you're the only one here working on a Mac, though, right? Nobody else is working on a Mac? I assume, okay. I assume if you're in chat, if you're working on a Mac, let me know. I'm kind of curious how many other people are actually doing that versus PC. I assume that most of us are developing on PCs, but I've seen plenty of companies that actually did Mac development, especially the ones that were doing mobile devices. They're doing iOS and iPad development. Those studios tended to be very Mac heavy, even in the office. I remember going to a couple and I was like, I would be interested in maybe working here, but just don't make me work on a Mac because I want my.
There's also like, and this is again, this has nothing to do with Unity specifically or even Unreal, but my God, does like they're not kidding when they say there's a walled garden for Apple products. Like people do not realize the complexity of building for Mac. You can use the cloud build stuff and it makes it easier, but if you're doing for example, an augmented reality mobile application, you can just build an APK, send it to people. Abracadabra, they can install it in their phone and they can test it. Very easy. If you want to build an iOS application in Unity and distribute it to a bunch of people to test out, you need to set up the app developer ID, set up test flight. You need to use a Mac to build the Mac application. You're not allowed to build Mac builds on Windows. So but in contrast, if you're on Mac, you can build Android builds. So there's a whole load of nuance that if you're trying to build multi-platform and support Apple devices, they make it very hard for you to the point where on top of that extra time I said where it's usually not worth it, it is also an absolute pain in the ass. Now, one counterpoint to my own argument here is when it comes to mobile devices, it's the exact opposite. If you're making a mobile product, a huge proportion of the audience is going to be on iOS devices, to the point where you'd be a fool to focus only on Android rather than iOS if you're building an application for phones. So you do have to take that into account. But to do that, you're almost certainly going to have to buy an Apple device to make your builds on. There are ways around it, and there's other hacks you can do, but it's so tedious that I swear to God, I've worked on projects where I've literally had to just buy an Apple device exclusively so I can press the build button so that I can deliver certain client projects. So yeah, if it's a mobile application, your mileage may vary. It's different there. But PC game for Steam, 100% go Windows.
When you said that like more than half the people are probably on iPhone, the funny part is I think when you look at the actual numbers, it's like 4-to-1 on revenue. Like the money, the actual spending and the purchases. If you're building a game or an application, iPhone is
because they have their own integrated store system, which is very easy to work with, and it sounds trustworthy. Well, let's be real. A lot of us still have misgivings about Android because the store looks like spam. It feels uncomfortable giving Android apps your money because it doesn't feel vetted. And in contrast, the iOS store, like it is so hard to get an app on the iOS store. Like you have to go through so many hoops and talk to so many people and go through many phases of stuff that it gives it that air of sort of, vetting. That's not always true. Some real stinkers have made it through that vetting process, but the truth is, in general, it feels more trustworthy. So I think people are more likely to spend money on in-app purchases on iOS devices than they are going to on Android.
All right, Andrew, I don't know if you have an answer for this one, but I thought you might. It says, I'm currently struggling to finding and making sounds for my game. Sorry. Do you have recommendations, or is it best to pay an expert? Now, I'm curious because I know you're building your RPG. I assume sounds is something that you do, and you also occasionally hire experts. So what are you doing for sound, and what do you recommend for somebody who's looking to add sound to their game? Now that we know that sound and audio is actually in games, apparently. Jason mentioned that earlier.
Really?
Apparently, that's one of the things. They even have jobs to hire people to add noise to games. I don't know.
Who knew?
I think you should start out with the asset store. I think you should start out the asset store. You should specifically start out, if you're making anything RPG, with my own audio package.
Oh.
Now, but the reality is there's a ton of sounds on the asset store, and you know, I would just start buying some packs there. They're not super expensive. The audio section is relatively one of the cheapest sections on the asset store. For what you get, there's packs with thousands of sounds. And I would suggest getting some of those, putting them in your library of, go-to things. I know Jason Story has a nice fancy way of organizing his audio library.
I might even show it off in a sec, just so people
yeah,
know
I figured. And this is the type of thing, like, just have on deck where you can just pull them in, because you don't need the perfect sound right now, but having a sound right now is good and the right thing to do. To start with audio from the beginning and not delay implementing audio. You should always start with audio implemented. It doesn't have to be the right sound. Just get something in there, and then keep track of which sounds you want to replace later. And when you're at the point where you're ready to do custom sounds, you can probably hire somebody who can do the custom sounds if that's what you want, or go to another sound library that might be more expensive, and not on the asset store if the sounds on the asset store you don't like. But the reality is, when it comes to sound, if it works in your game, if people don't notice it, it's because it works really well, right? People only really notice the sound when it either is terrible or when it's just such a perfect moment that they're like, holy shit, that moment with the sound coming in and the particles just work so well. That's the two times that they notice it. So hopefully you'll be on the holy shit side, not the wow, that's terrible sound side. But if it's from the asset store, nobody cares.
Yeah,
I just like the free effects too. I'm sorry, there was 180 or something of 195. So if you want to check those out.
So before I show off my own particular audio library, I just want to kind of clarify one thing, and I really can't stress this enough. People do not realize how expensive things can get. You get what you pay for, and the truth of the matter is, every individual thing in your game is a career that somebody has learned, studied, and done. And so the idea is that people look at audio as going, oh, how much would it cost for a song anyway? What, 20, 30, whatever? Think about it. You're in real life. Imagine if you want a unique song for your game. That's somebody who has to sit there and come up with it, and then make it, and then construct it, and then master it, and go through the whole process. And if you're paying that person even minimum wage, that's going to cost you hundreds for that one song. But the truth is, you don't want minimum wage. You want someone good enough at their job that they have a high price, which means songs in general, to get a soundtrack for your game might cost you 10,000 if you're doing it properly and you want a unique soundtrack. All the big games that you can think of are probably somewhere in that range for their unique soundtracks. If that's as a minimum, I mean, by the way, not the high end. And then same goes for things like writing. You think, oh, writing, I'll just have someone help me write my game. To have someone write your script for your game might be 5,000. So these things aren't cheap. They all add up. So to lean on what Andrew's saying, you have to ask yourself where it's valuable. Now, I truly do believe that audio is one of the most important parts of a game, and I do think it's worth having at least one or two unique soundtracks or songs, or just a particular thing that becomes your game's unique sound. Specifically, we can get into leitmotifs for your protagonists and how there should be some running theme, because unlike everything else, audio is a story. And so the audio should swell and grow and change relative to the experience of your game. It shouldn't just be arbitrarily thrown in. That being said, not every single song or track needs to be unique. You can have generic background noise and the sounds of a city, and you can have all of the music that's passively kind of in your experience. But it's those moments that Andrew was explaining, those sorts of hits where like your main character fights the bad guy for the first time. That shouldn't be something you pick up off an asset store. That moment should be whatever it is. You can find someone to do it. You can get it cheaper by finding someone who's new at audio and wants to get into games. Because for all of you out there who want an audio person for their game, I bet you there's at least equally one or two people out there who want to put audio in a game, but they don't know where to go or who to meet. Now, the truth is, a lot of people will approach them with no project and go, oh, can you make audio for my game? And it's this crappy asset store thing that they've cobbled together. If your game is in a good position and you're 70% through it, I guarantee you'll have no problem finding people who will like desperately want to make audio for your game. You demo it, you show it in the right places like Reddit or whatever, and say, I'm looking for an audio person who wants to help me on the project. You can start getting into conversations that'll get you really people who are genuinely passionate to work on your project. That's down the line. But to kind of circle back to you can fill in most of your audio with assets. That's what I do. And again, because client assets, that tends to help. So to share my screen, let me do, pull that up. Let me know if you can see this. Where's the button?
Should pop up any second now.
Yeah, it should be. There we go.
There it goes.
Yeah, so this is Eagle, which I use for my audio managing stuff. And as you can see over here on the left, I've got a bunch of folders. One of them is Unity Asset Store. And under there, I've got the All Access Music Bundle, which is 278 tracks, and the Ambient Puzzle Music Bundle, that's 54, and Button SFX Library, that's 241, and so on and so on. So I've picked up many asset packs over the years. Apparently, I've got 2,636 from Kafofo. And then there's a bunch of others. One of my personal favorites is actually Room Tones, which is this one here. That's really useful to set a scene in a game. But anyway, there's like UI and whatever. But then once you have all of these packs, it comes down to how easily can you add them and go through them, because it's really difficult to have thousands of tracks and then go, oh, I just need to find like a good plinky puzzle game sound, and it's so exhausting to go through that whole process. Well, here, I can just type like be indie. No, that doesn't do anything for me. I'm going to go back to all actually at the top. So let's go with puzzle games. So suddenly I have all of the puzzle-y related sounds. And you see I've tagged them for different things. And so it's very easy for me to find stuff. And it lets me demo them live. I don't know if you can hear that, but when I hover over it, starts playing the demo for the sounds. And then in all my tags, I've gone and tagged them all. So I've got here tag categories, digital, glitch sound, zombie sounds. I've got binaural, SFX, surround sounds. I can go in through moods, which ones are happy sounds or whatever, and I can go through and sort them and organize them. So it's very easy for me to just find like, oh, I'm doing a game and I want gun sounds. Well, just write gun, and then there you go. And you've got all the various different weapon effects, reloading and whatever. So it comes down to as easy it is for you to use it. So this is my personal preference. There's lots of other tools out there. I like this one because it's a one-time fee of like $30, and you don't have to pay subscriptions like Soundly and other services. But yeah, so short answer, I do use this a lot. It's a great way to sort of manage your resources in audio, but when you hit that point that you really want to take it up a professional level, find someone, hire someone professional to do the unique parts of your project. Yeah, how do I stop sharing?
Turn that one off and turn that one back on. Really quickly, there was a question earlier that I didn't answer that I want to pop up before I forget. Let me scroll up here real quick. And it was a really simple one. Did anything get buffed? So they're asking about in the battler if any of the races or classes got buffed. And I wanted to mention that, yes, one of them did get buffed, and it's the least picked one. So the least popular one on there, you can see it if you're watching the stream, did get a little bit of a buff. So you might want to check that out. It's in light blue up on the screen. It looks like somebody might have just switched over. There.
It's Andrew.
So we'll see how it goes. See if Andrew wins the JetBrains rider license. We'll kick that off in just a little bit, by the way. So, let's see. There are a lot of questions here. Were there any questions, by the way, that you guys really wanted to answer? If so, let me know, and I'll make sure to pop them up. Also, if you're still with us live or watching later, make sure that you hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and share the stream. It helps a lot, and makes me smile and happy. Also, we got quite a few people out here. It's really nice. So there was a question that I think is going to have a really fast answer, but I wanted to bring it up because I think that it could also lead into a little bit of a discussion about promoting games. And it is, how much money do I need to promote my game on a 12 million subscriber YouTube channel? And I wanted to first say that a ridiculous amount, I'm sure. 12 million subscribers, you're probably
more than it's worth is probably the easiest short answer.
Yes, you're probably well into six figures of payment, so well over $100,000 is my rough guess. But the value that you're probably going to get out of that is likely to be extremely low. And I think what happens is a lot of people see like Raid Shadow Legends or some of these other like super advertising games that are like out in front of everybody. They see them out there advertising and pushing a lot, but they're not, like, you got to realize that when they're doing that, they're not usually losing money. Like, they're doing that at a profitable rate because they've already built a game that has a monetization setup that's working, that's optimized, and now they're kind of just pumping money into it. They're pumping advertising into it to drive up the revenue and sales. Like, they've already got that thing optimized and ready to go up to these giant scales. Even at the small scale, like, I feel like advertising your game just through a video when it's not going to be profitable like that is, I don't know, I feel like it's kind of misleading. Like, people see those ads and they think that that's a good way to do it, or a profitable way, but don't realize that those companies are spending, $50,000, $100,000 a day on ads minimum. They might be spending $1 million a day on ads. But they're making $2 million a day in microtransactions. So what do you guys think on this? Any thoughts on just advertising games?
Yeah, well, I got a couple things. So I'd say, first of all, if you know the right people and make the right connections, I mean, you can get it featured on the 12 million YouTube channel without spending any money. Or you just, get lucky and your game is in a genre that person plays, and they just kind of happen to pick it up. I'm sure there are things that you can do to stack the odds in your favor a little bit more. But and then as far as advertising goes, I mean, if you just spend like a bunch of money on one ad spot on like a big YouTube channel, it's probably not going to do a whole lot for you. I think some of the reasons that companies like Raid, Shadow Legends, or whatever are really successful is because they're not just advertising on one person's YouTube channel, they're advertising on a bunch of them. And, most often there is going to be, the viewers of these channels are going to be seeing, all these different ad spots. And then when they see this, over and over and over again on multiple people's different channels, then it's going to be much more likely for them to, actually go install the product and, maybe spend some money on it later.
I mean, I've seen the Raid Shadow Legends one on enough channels to remember the name, and I don't play mobile games.
Yeah, same. I'll say on the marketing thing again, hit the nail on the head with the idea of it's who you know, because marketing is a really big topic. There's a lot to say, and the short answer is the landscape has changed in the last 20 years. The way you would market something is not the same as the way you'd market it these days. And there's a lot more to be said for influencer marketing. That is true, but people often make the mistake of saying, "Oh, I'll throw money at the problem, and then I'll have someone famous play it, and that'll get me lots of money." It doesn't work like that. The truth is, audiences are interested in watching streamers because of this whole concept of a parasocial relationship. They enjoy an audience. They enjoy somebody they're watching because they find the person fun. And what's interesting is they will feed on the energy of the person playing. If you have somebody give an ad spot for a game and go, "Hi guys, let's interrupt what we're doing and play an ad spot for this fucking thing we have to do to make the bills," that's not going to make you any sales. The way it works, and if you want really good advice on this, go out, check Thomas Brush's channel. He talks about this a lot. What you want to do is entice big YouTubers to play your games. That's why there was such a big market lead in games like Five Nights at Freddy's and Slenderman over the years. You can track this trend where currently big streamers are playing X type of game, make X type of game. You won't need to convince them or pay them. it's becoming the thing because they're trying to make content too. And if your game fits into the content that they're trying to make, they will play it and they'll be excited when they play it, and they won't be trying to bullshit their audience. They'll be playing it for fun, and their audience will be like, that looked fun, I want that too, and then they'll buy it. So the truth is, if you're going for influencer marketing, the short answer is you just have to make something that appeals to the audience of the people that you're making it for. There's ways to do this. Cluster Truck did this perfectly because they built Steam and Twitch integration into their game, so they had unique things they could do. But whenever a big streamer was playing, they would actively log on and mess with the game in real time and send messages to the devs through the game as they played. And that was a really great way to get engagement, because now if you're a streamer and you want to get involved in the hype, you want the devs jumping in and having part of the experience because it's fun for your audience and it's fun for them and it's more marketing, and it's a lot of very clever marketing all around. So there's a lot to this, but the short answer is that only works if you're building a social style game or one of those streamer games that aims for jump scares or aims for hyper difficulties or whatever. If you're trying to get streamers to play your game, you can't just throw money at them and have them play it. What you want to do instead is build up your own audience. So it depends on the kind of game. A side note to that too, if it's a story-based game or narrative-based with whatever like voiceovers or storyline, that won't do well with streamers, because any smart streamer knows they're trying to be funny themselves and be entertaining to their audience. And if your game is like 80% dialogue and cutscenes or whatever, they can't riff on that. But BioShock had that problem because a lot of the dialogue would cut over the voiceover and gameplay of the people playing the game. So there's an interesting dichotomy between the audience and the people making it. So you won't sell those games to streamers as well. What you need to do instead is sell your audience on a journey. And that's where the other route of building a community, setting up a Discord, doing devlogs, and getting people who want to be involved in the game from the start, that's where you build that audience, because you get people who are hooked in on the early adventure of your building your game, and you get them involved in helping writing stories and choosing the angles of where things go. And then you build a very organic audience who's really excited for your game, and they will evangelize for you. So it's not only just how do I market my game, it's what game am I making, who's my audience I'm marketing to, and how do I build their interest, and how do I organically get their interest rather than just throw money at marketing for them. It is a huge topic, but I would say don't look at influencer marketing as the like be all and end all. It's only for very niche specific kinds of games.
I think that was really good advice. We're getting kind of short on time. I've got a bunch more questions. I have literally like 40 questions pinned. It's really difficult to figure out what's a good one, what one to pop up next. I like that you kind of dove right into this one though in the middle of that answer when they're asking about whether you should focus on something that's currently popular or try to make your dream game. And I mean, you kind of mentioned like making the super popular stuff. If you have that kind of target and you're making the specific type of game that's super popular for that reason, could make sense. But I'll make sure that you're doing the right type of thing, right, for that. Not just any type of game would fit. Let's jump over to it. A question that I don't know how to answer. I like
one note in the last one, because while I did give a broad overview, I will say one thing. There is an actual task in doing that we talked about, the idea of marketing research. Don't just like go to Google yourself and go, oh, people are playing these kinds of games, so they're popular. Like that is an entire career people do for a living. Go look at the metrics for what actually sells on Steam. Go look at the metrics for the top played games on Twitch, and then go and actually find out not what your own personal bubble is telling you is popular. Go and find the numbers for it, and then you can do A/B tests. There's like look into how to do that marketing if you really are aiming for that popular audience. It's not going to be what you think it is. It very rarely is.
And I feel like you should probably be watching those streams and seeing, like, you really need to understand that market. It's not the kind of thing you want to, like, I loosely know it exists. I don't actually watch streams. I'm going to advertise on them. You should be watching them and getting an idea of what works there, what streams are good, and what types of things work on there. I think
and also, like, when it comes to like, should you make something that you're passionate about or something that hits an audience? The truth is, if you don't play the kind of game you're making, you'll have a really hard time knowing how to make a good one. Now, you don't have to be the guy on the team that plays it, but if you don't have at least one person in your team who plays the kinds of games you're trying to make, you will make something rubbish because you'll have no idea what that audience actually looks for. So there is something to be said for having some level of understanding. And completely separately from that, if it's your own first game, enthusiasm is something that's going to ebb and flow. You will lose so much interest in your own project, even if it's the best idea in the world and you love it. 2 months in, you're going to hate your own game. Happens to every single person who ever makes anything. And so having a game that you, at least on the face of it, enjoy the types of games will give you a little bit more momentum to keep going. So sometimes it's, unless it's like your 5th game and you're genuinely trying to like earn money for your game studio, at least try to make something you're vaguely interested in. Otherwise you will hate it and you will stop making it and you'll give up and fail another project.
So you've led me into another question.
Nice
another one that I've got on my list I want to pop up. So have you guys lost the love for game development because of stress? And if so, how did you handle it or get over it? There was another question similar to this about just dealing with productivity and stuff. So have you guys run into this situation where you just like, we're like, I don't like doing game dev anymore. I hate it. I'm done. I never want to do it again. Or maybe you just were like, I'm done for the month or something. Is this something that's common for you guys? Or if so, do you have a way to get over it? Or does it never happen because game dev is just too damn fun and you can't have that problem?
I think it happens to everything. It is fun but it happens. You get stuck on a problem that takes way too long, you know, or you can't figure something out, or something happens. Maybe you, whatever it is. For me, I when I play other games, halfway through like the first 10-15 minutes, I start thinking, I want to make my game. And something about playing other people's games inspires me to stop that and to come back to my game. So you know, I think you gotta find what brings you back in the end, whether it's something that inspires you, whether it's you know, the dream that you have on why you did it in the first place. You gotta find a way to come back.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe there's kind of some things that you can do in the moment from time to time. Just kind of maybe switch up your environment. If you've been at your computer for too long, you know, go out, take a walk, go to the gym or something like that. Just kind of like re-energize yourself, you know, just kind of do some things like that. But, you know, I think it might come to a point where those types of things don't give you as much benefit as they might have. And in that case, then maybe, yeah, it does make sense to kind of switch up what you're working on in your project. Maybe if you've kind of been like, you know, stuck in one particular area for a while, you know, maybe just get that to a point where it's like, you know, good enough. And then you can kind of start looking at some different problems. Or maybe if you're, you know, doing a lot of the art and programming and stuff, and you've kind of been doing a lot of programming stuff, you know, maybe switch over to doing some art things and just kind of, you know, mix it up a little bit, just so you're not kind of doing, you know, stuck doing the same thing. And then I think, you know, yeah, when you kind of get away from that initial thing that you've been working on for a while, then you kind of like, you know, start in the back of your mind, you know, thinking about some of the ideas, you know, different ways to solve the problems and things like that. And then it'll kind of start building that anticipation that makes you actually want to get back to those things that you've been working on previously.
I struggle with this one daily. I've got problems with something called executive function. It's the way your brain works in attacking problems and dealing with things you're supposed to focus on. And so I go through phases of hyper focus on something for 2 weeks, and then I just don't care in the slightest. And so my brain will actively, happily drop things every 2 weeks and go, what are you doing that for? Why aren't you learning more about? And it's completely something separate altogether. So I've had to treat this academically and learn techniques to keep my brain on task when it needs to kind of do things. And 100%, that's one of my biggest tips for that. Is one of the main reasons is novelty factors. If you're working on a project, what's going to happen is when things are going well, you've got high motivation. As soon as you hit a brick wall, like a bug you can't fix, and you spend an entire day with no progress made, your motivation will plummet. You'll hate it and go, I was doing progress every day, and now I'm making no progress, and I hate this project. I hate everything else. Leave me alone. I don't want to do this anymore. So what you need to do is avoid that problem. And the 2 ways to do it is, in the event of hitting a brick wall where you've wasted 2 hours for the day that you've been trying to solve some bug, if you allow yourself to go to bed without having made any progress, you'll wake up the next day not wanting to ever look at that project, and you'll be really afraid to open it because you'll be expecting that again. So always keep yourself a list of easy wins. In my case, I have my to-do list of important tasks I need to do, and the second one is really simple things like put a nice animation on the swishy UI or put some sound effects on the clicks that are so like not important from the grand scheme of things needing to be done, but they at least will be a guaranteed step forward in the project. And so if I know I'm about to end my day with no progress, I'll stop what I'm doing and I'll give myself some wins. So at least the next day, as much as I might be, oh, I have to do that bug and fix it, I can at least say, well, at least I got X stuff done. It's not a 0 day. It's a day of some kind of progress. And the other benefit to that is if you're working on one thing, try to have those other things be in a completely different frame. Just like you were saying, I usually put them in the UI stuff because I personally find UI and sound effects fun. So they're the fun side projects I can do when I'm stuck on a horrible networking bug and I need to just say, nope, I can't handle this anymore. It's not working correctly. Let's go make some shiny UI. And then I kind of feel re-energized when I come back the next day on the other stuff. There's tons and tons of strategies like this, but those ones in particular definitely get me through my projects. And speaking of the going for exercise and walks, every morning I do this. I listen to my audiobook. I go for a walk before I sit down on my computer. And that gets the brain going, because what happens is I sit down and I write my to-do list of tasks and I read it and I double check what I need to do. Then I go for my walk. And on my walk, I'm thinking about all the tasks I need to do. And so by the time I get back, I'm energized to going, I have some ideas on how I might solve those. And so you'll attack the computer with kind of furious energy once you get started. So it's a lot about tricking your brain. And some people need it more than most.
And I like that tip about kind of like queuing up some of those easy wins, because I feel like a lot of times when you're kind of like in the weeds of some problems, like you'll come across little things in your projects, or you'd be like, oh, you know, I should add this little feature in here, or, you know, this cool thing would be good to add in there. So I think it's a good idea to, like, you know, write those out in a list, so it doesn't like pull you away from the main thing that you're working on, so you don't kind of lose that momentum on that. And then yeah, you know, when you kind of need that extra little boost, you know, feel free to go to the queue.
I like to keep in mind the wins I have too. Like when every once in a while you create some method or some system that's like just really clever, and just feels clever and does a great job at what it does. Something so stupid, simple, and you're like, but it works amazing. So I love to talk about those. Whenever I use one of those things, I always, on my streams, I always talk about it, because it feels so good to have discovered some little hacky system that does an amazing thing and makes things better. So I love to just remind myself about those.
In fact, I go one step further in that when I do something I'm really like proud about visually and it looks really cool, I have Share X installed, and I will press Shift Print Screen, and I'll drag a rectangle over the section of the screen that I did something cool on, and it records a GIF live, and then I just play with it a bit, and I record that GIF of something fun I just did, and I have it set to auto upload to Imager, and so I have an Imager library of any time I did a cool thing. And so if I ever need that motivation boost, I can go back to Imager and look at the GIFs of the features. So if you feel like you've done nothing for a week, you can go back and go, oh yeah, there's the cool teleport thing I did, or oh, that was the swishy animation. And that reminds you that you're not terrible at your job. It could be good motivation.
I'm going to kick off the giveaway in just a second. I want to give everybody one last chance to enter. You got maybe 1 minute. So
and let's see if we can get that to 200 likes too. We're getting pretty close.
Oh yeah, 191. So hit the button if you haven't already. Thanks to our new member too for signing up, and you're welcome to join as well if you want. Everybody, thanks, Greg. And if you have questions, drop them in chat. We'll take a couple more questions. I'm going to kick off the giveaway in just a second. I just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to enter before we start. And I did buff the assassins, so that was the one that got a little bit of a buff today because they were not getting picked, and I don't think they've won in quite a while. And there was also a comment in chat about maybe adding in some stat tracking for these things for players and things. I think I might actually do that. I've been looking for some opportunities to play with Unity services stuff, and I think that might actually be like a really neat integration to tie in with how many battles each person has had, how many fights they've won, lost, how much damage they've done, taken, all that kind of stuff. Might be neat to put up like some statistics and have some fun with it, and then have people be able to interact and get those. So I think I'll probably do that sometime in the next couple of weeks if people are interested. I even if they aren't, I'll probably do it just because it'll be fun. So I figured I'd talk about that. I'm gonna shrink that back down though, and then we'll kick the button off in just a second. Actually, why don't I do it now? So let's start the button, and I'll do a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. People are still entering, so I feel bad for whoever gets in late. 0, and here's my finger. Did I click? There it goes. It's closing in. All right, cool. So a giveaway will run, and you'll see your character's fight there. If you survive to the end, you'll win the JetBrains rider license. So good luck. We'll see who ends up the winner at the end. All right, let's go on. Oh no, it's gonna pull up this question next. So this is one I like the name, so it made me pop it up because the name was switch statement, and it said, "How do you get to know other developers as a complete noob from a social point of view?" So they're wondering how you kind of get out there and kind of get in front of people. And I know that Jason's got some good advice on this. He's seen people do this in the past, but I want to just open up with, I think game jams are a good opportunity, especially local meetups. If you can go to any of those, if they have them in your area, you can actually talk to people and build like really fast form friendships and relationships and get to know people. It's a lot easier if you're all in person, locked in an area for 4 hours or 2 hours or a weekend or whatever. But there are lots of other online and remote opportunities too. Anybody want to jump in with whatever their favorites are?
Yeah, I mean, I think like forums and Discord channels are just a really great way to start kind of just interacting with people, and talking about some of the problems that you've been working on lately. And then I think, the more you kind of interact there, you'll start to become more familiar with some of the people who are also kind of regular in there. And then, maybe it gets to a point where like, like some person has some like, particular expertise in something that you might be working on. So maybe you'll just kind of reach out to them directly and get a little bit of feedback. And I think that could be just like a good way to kind of start building relationships with other people.
My answer is going to be particularly clinical. I'm a moderator in 8 or 10 Discords. A lot of them are Unity-based style stuff. And if I was to be, there are 3 kinds of people in most communities. There are people who arrive and self-promote. Basically, every couple of days they post some other Twitter GIF about their project and what they're doing, and don't engage past that point. Then there's people who arrive in a Discord and ask questions, and they just constantly go, "I need help with this. Make this for me. How do I do this?" Some are nicer than others, but the fundamental philosophy of what they're saying is the same. Help me. I'm here because I want you guys to help me. Or you're all people I can market to. Then there's a third kind of people who are there to help other people. And the truth of the matter is, if you want to make friends in a community or you want to get jobs or anything else, you're telegraphing a certain kind of person by what you do or say. And so in my mind, as somebody who's, say I'm working on a project and I want to hire someone for audio, and I see 3 kinds of people. One person constantly asking for help on how to do certain things in audio, one person who constantly posts little GIFs of their audio projects, or one person that's answering other people's questions about audio projects. Which of the 3 are you going to go to if you want to actually engage with them and deal with them in projects? And for me, it's always going to be the person who's helpful, but not trying to promote themselves. So the truth is, it doesn't matter what community you're talking about, whether it's Discord or going to Game Jams Live or anything. The truth is, most people they're either obviously trying to get what they want, or they're trying to help other people get what they want. And so if you just make it your goal to assess if other people need help and apply your skills to help them, everything else just sort of happens. So you don't have to like try too hard to make friends. The truth of the matter is, most people in indie games are there because they want to be. It's not like other industries in a lot of cases. It is a desired job. It's not easy in all cases, but it's a job that loads of people want to do out of passion. If you're in indie specifically, slightly different story for AAA, but if you're in indie, you did it because you wanted to be an indie. It was a passion you had. And everyone wants to talk about their passions. That's not a hard thing to do, to get a bunch of game devs to talk about game dev. That's not a hard thing to do.
It wasn't like the college professor that told them, or the college counselor said, "You should be a game developer. That's your job. Go pick that one."
Something tells me very few college professors or job counselors are going to suggest you be a game dev. But so if you're going into it, that's your personal preference. And so if you want to make friends and meet people and all that stuff, be somebody people want to talk to. And the best way to do that is to be helpful and useful. In my case, most of the jobs I got stemmed from me looking at someone posting their work or helping out and going, "Hey, did you know you can do this?" Or "Here's a little thing that might help you out." And then them saying thank you. And then they got to know me. And then we started talking. And then they helped me out on stuff. And then all of a sudden you're working together on things. So just change your philosophy from what can this person do for me to what can I do for this person. Very simple change, but everything else will just happen for you after that point. If you just make yourself somebody people want to engage with.
All right, let's go on to another one. Is it important to get a degree for game development? No. Or is it better to learn game development by courses and YouTube videos? No on that either. I wouldn't say it's best to learn probably from a wide variety of stuff, from courses, YouTube stuff, and work and game development schools as well. I think that like having a wide variety of like sources for information is really useful. Even books. Like I started my Unity stuff with books. So I would say it's definitely not necessarily important or required. It's a little bit more valuable on the programming side, generally less valued on the art and design side. And even on the programming side, experience or portfolio matters more than pretty much anything else. Degrees or just like certificates or anything else. It's somebody says that you did something, but you still have to prove that you actually can do it and that you actually did the work and didn't just get paper. But there's some value there, but it's definitely not required. I don't know if anybody's got any other thoughts on this. We talked about it before, but I just figured I'd pop it up. Okay. We'll go on to actually let's take this one instead of the VR one, because I think there was a lot of chat about the VR one and some answers in there. So how do you know when you've gotten the flow of a game engine like Unreal or Unity? How do you know that like you're good with it or you're comfortable with it or that you're, I would say, an experienced programmer? There were a couple other questions like this too, like that have popped up asking the same kind of thing. Like, how do you know that you're a good programmer, or how do you know if you're like totally bad and terrible or a noob? So do you guys have thoughts on this? I feel like it's really difficult to self-diagnose and self-judge this stuff.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know.
Anybody got any?
I would suggest it's when you're able to just do things and you're not getting stuck constantly. You're always going to get stuck with something. I think, no matter how good you get, at some point you're going to be like, wait, what do I do here? But in general, if you're able to use the tool and make progress and you're not like, just bumbling around, clicking things randomly, trying to do stuff, then yeah, you're probably got the flow down. You've got you can open it up and you do stuff and, you come out with a project and now you got it.
There's two answers to this. One of them's closer to Andrew's, and the other one's a bit more of a joke, but it's got some merit. So if I was to say, actually, I'm curious what everyone else's opinion of, what's the difference between a hobbyist painter and a professional painter?
One's getting paid.
Bingo. The truth of the matter is, it comes down to you're a professional when people pay you for your work. Does that mean you're good at it? Not necessarily, but it means you're a professional. And that's the first step. Is the short answer is you can claim to be a professional at something once you're at least able to do it to a degree that people are willing to pay money for. But to be more charitable to the point of the question about whether you're good at it, 100% what Andrew was saying, for me, I use the word friction. And that means that in anything you do, whether it's some kind of physical hobby or whether it's game development or writing a story, there's a point where the tools get in the way of what you're doing. There's a bandwidth line between I have an idea versus I manifest it on the paper or on the screen or something. And there's always some pathway that gets you there. And in the case of something like Unity, it's how many times do I have to wait for the thing to reload and drag stuff in? All of these things get in the way of turning one thing to the other. And the more you use something or the better you get, the shorter that feedback loop gets. For example, if you end up wasting a load of time doing light baking because you're waiting for the Unity light baker on, whatever, that's going to waste your time. You switch to something like Bakery, which bakes in like a fifth of the time, that's going to lower your friction between doing the job, and that's going to make you better at what you're doing. So in general, when you start to feel like you don't have to think about the tools to do your job, that's when you're comfortable. It's got nothing to do with the tool itself. It's when do you feel like you have to fight your tools to get the job done, and when can you work around them to the point where you know how it works. That's not to say the tool has no bugs or issues to fight with, but there's a point where you fought with them so much, you found ways to work around the best you can, that you don't end up feeling like you've lost a day if you have to fight with them. Like, we all have issues with Unity all of the goddamn time. It crashes for us, it breaks, it's various stuff, but we've got strategies that work for us. We know how to save backups of things. We know when to be careful if something's broken. If something is going to break on us, we always have a backup of something we can work on while that's reloading or refreshing. There's ways of continuing your work, and the less friction you have, the better you are. That's basically it. The more work you can get done, regardless of the tools or friction.
So where was this other? I was going to pop up another question right after that, because I generally agree, though. I think if you can get in and you have an idea, you can build it, then you're good to go. If you have an idea and you have no idea where to start, then you should probably start keep working on those skills. It's the blank slate project thing for me. Like, if you can get a good idea of where to start an empty new project and come up with something, not be totally lost.
And you really need to know it all off by heart, right? I'm not saying you have to know everything perfectly. Like, again, I've seen Jason do this too, because I do the same thing, is you'll be starting a new project going, right, let's do a thing which has X, and I don't know how to do it offhand. I'll Google it, but I know the code well enough that I can tell from the code I've Googled what is actually doing what I want versus what's wrong for the job. I'll copy it, paste it, change a couple lines, and move on. That's not me knowing it intuitively offhand, but it's me being able to remove the friction of solving the problem by knowing how to go from not having code that does it to code that does have it, by quickly Googling, finding it, pasting it, doing all of that stuff, and I'm more efficient with my work. So it's not about memorizing everything. It's about being efficient at getting stuff done.
Yeah. You're never going to memorize all the stuff on how to do all it. Well, maybe somebody will, but I'm never going to memorize all the stuff on how to do the things. I constantly am looking things up, Googling, or just popping in Discord and asking. Even just, I think last week, popped in Discord to ask about rotating a stupid canvas the right way so that it would look right from my camera angle. Like, I'm not sure. I know I can figure this out, but I'm going to do a little bit of research. I Googled a little bit, and then I just asked questions, and then it was obvious once I asked a question. Like, oh, okay. I can see it right in my question what the problem is, but until you do that.
And I had the same problem with Git. I used to be like, spend an hour setting up Git. I was like, oh, I have to go and do the Git thing and then get the Git ignore and make sure it's LFS and then put the file. And I'd be like, I would waste so much time. I feel so uncomfortable doing it. But you do it enough times, you save your own Git ignore file, you save your own attributes file. You can now go, done. I've now set up a project. It's got source control. It's set up correctly. I have a way I do it. I can move on. Those little things, the more of those that add up, the better you get.
There was a question here about Playmaker. I want to jump into this one real quick. Do you recommend Playmaker, and do you guys recommend GameMaker too? For me, the answer to both of these is no. Playmaker, I used to recommend to people, but now Unity bought Bolt and integrated it in as visual scripting. I just recommend that instead because it's built in, integrated, and I understand and know it pretty well. I actually have a video on that I need to release sometime soon from GameDev Guild. I actually did a great presentation on how to use that, the whole visual scripting system without rewriting your game, but how to use it in a way that lets designers do cool stuff and adds to your game without having to write a bunch of code. So I usually go with that, and GameMaker 2 is not something that I played with at all. So I don't have any thoughts or recommendations on it. But you guys... thoughts on Playmaker, GameMaker, or visual scripting in general?
I have some thoughts. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I kind of actually started out learning game dev stuff on GameMaker, and I think that was like really beneficial for me. Just kind of like learning those like initial steps of like, you know, how like game development kind of works. Like, what is a very basic pipeline of like, you know, how do I import assets? How do I get them to show up on the screen? How do I get, you know, objects moving around on the screen? And then you can start kind of adding in, you know, basic little logic. You know, when I press a key, how do I get that character to move or shoot? And then, you know, when I destroy an enemy, how do I increase my score counter? So I think it's a really nice, simple, easy to understand environment where you can kind of learn like the basics of like what game development is. And then of course you can, you know, take it as far as you want and make a fully released game using GameMaker if you want to, or you could move over to something like Unity. Just kind of depends on what your overall vision is.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I've not used Playmaker or Bolt or GameMaker, but I do think that these kind of things are great for kind of getting your feet wet and figuring things out, gain some early wins, gain some logic down, especially if it's a system that does employ, you know, logic that you would use when you're actually scripting versus You know, I guess a lot of kids these days learn with like coding blocks, and they obfuscate some of the logic. So, and that's good for a kid just learning how to oh, programming is fun. I can make this thing jump, but they're not really seeing the logic that goes behind it. At some point, you've got to move on from that. I think you've got to understand and get what you need out of that, and then move on to doing something yourself via code. Obviously, you can make a full game with Playmaker. That's well known. You can make a game, release it without ever writing a line of actual code. But I think at some point you do need to probably not graduate from, but learn how to do things differently, because in the end, Playmaker is a tool in your tool belt, but it's not the only tool in your tool belt.
Totally.
Yeah, I find it easier to do code than visual blocks. Sorry, I was just saying, like, when people start off with visual blocks, I think that it's good for like a short period of time, and then it's great to jump right over to code if you want to get fast and good at it. Because if you stick with the visual blocks for too long, I feel like it gets harder to start seeing the value in how much faster you can do these things by writing some code than dragging blocks around. I don't know. What do you think, Jason?
I have some philosophical disagreements with the concept of kind of node-based coding. I think it's a bad idea in general. There's a lot of, it's a really big topic I could go into, but it's not worth it here. I fully respect why. There's a fantastic article by Joel Spolsky from 2006 where he talks about usability and the differences between Mac and Windows, and why Windows users, even Windows power users, suddenly freeze on a Mac and it feels icky, and they just they can't even do simple things like close things. And I'm one of those people. I suddenly I lose basic common sense using a Mac because my brain is not wired that way. And so I fully understand why people have a sudden freezing when they look at code and go, this is too complicated. But the idea of nodes is just more easy on them to figure out. But the truth is the logic's the same. Like there's you're learning if statements, you're learning while loops. And the truth of the matter is you're deluding yourself if you're thinking yourself that it's easier to do it in nodes. It's more palatable. But the truth is, if you can do node-based editing, you can do code. You just have to get over that personal fear of it. And code is just more powerful. Like it's designed for that purpose. It is a language designed to solve that problem, while nodes are an abstraction layer that causes more complexity and whatever. That's a whole different conversation. That's not to say it doesn't have its uses. I specifically love it for things like state machines, where you want to visualize your state flow. There is a very good reason to use nodes, but it's not stitching together vector math and other silly stuff. It is for complex shader stuff where it's got visual states, or it's for state machines where you want to track the flow of AI. There is good reasons, but it's not just writing lines of code. To answer the second part of that question, which is, do I recommend GameMaker? As I've said earlier, the coding portion of making a game is a comically small part of making a game. The part like I said, it's the whole, like, are you trying to be a poet? Well, spending all of your time learning to speak a certain language is not like learning your grammar is one thing, but like if you're learning German, that's not making you a better poet. If you're learning English, then it's not making you a better poet. The tools to become a poet is learning how to be a poet, and same with game design. So even if you're using what people consider to be an inferior or simpler engine like GameMaker, the truth is you probably don't know how to make a good game. You don't know how to make good level design. You don't know how to, structure the color theory, or how to make things compelling, or how to use game flow, or how to apply juice to your game. Like there's so many topics you can learn where you just forget about the code stuff and just focus on the tools of making a game, that there's no bad game engine to start with, because the act of making a game is so complicated. There's always stuff you can learn and then transcribe to the other solution and tools. So the example to me is looking at Vimlark's channel. Vimlark doesn't code, but he makes some of the best game jam games out there, in my opinion, because those games are solid and they show an understanding of contrast and color and game design and tutorialization, and the actual games are compelling and well structured, unlike a lot of game jam games that are written with more complicated code, because that's not relevant. The end user isn't reading your code, they're playing your game. And so the truth is, it doesn't matter what engine you pick, it's that you understand how to make a game. The code stuff is good, but it's not what's going to make your game a game. So use whatever tool you need to get the skills you need to have.
On that topic, I was curious, Jason, did you see the visual scripting talk that Ashley gave at the conference? I don't know if you actually watched that one.
I downloaded it. It's on my computer, but I haven't had time to watch it yet.
All right, I would definitely check it out. I'm gonna put it up on YouTube probably this week. But it was a really good example of how to use visual scripting and make it available to your non-programming side of your team to be able to do little interactions and little kind of like bite-sized chunks of the types of things that I actually want to use visual scripting for, where I don't want to go in like write a one-off script for all of these little things.
That's a valid use case, yeah. So what we call in the industry, we call that a DSL, or a domain-specific language. And that's where coding something might be really big and complicated and require a lot of custom code. But sometimes what you might do is, and I've done this for a client project before, you'll make your own text file format. So one thing I had a project for was, it was chapters of like a visual play, and there were subtitles that would show up for each chapter. And the clients were, quite frankly, changing their mind every goddamn week about what the subtitle was going to be. So rather than me having to open the code and change it or do anything messy, I wrote a text file that said chapter 1, title name, chapter 2, title name, and chapter 2, color, whatever. Some format that's like just ours, a unique language between us and the designers. And then I can deliver the product to them and they can change whatever the hell they like, and it's not going to take either of us time and effort. Now, the next level up from that is working with your designers to give them a visual tool. That's where you either have tool developers or, as Jason's suggesting there, having some kind of visual node system where you build nodes like hunt for enemy or find thing or whatever, and then the designers can design the AI by stitching together the blocks you give them. I love that. That's a great use. My problem has always been when people use it to write code, like literally do the math, where you're writing like vector add other vector combine stuff, and you've written like this much on screen for what constitutes one line of C# code or something. So as long as you're using it as a tool to make things easier for developers or designers, 100% good use.
All right, let's jump over to one that I don't know the answer to because I haven't had a chance to dive into, but I have some thoughts on it. It said Unity recently fully released their gaming services, but it's not free like Epic's online service. Do you think it will be free in the future? And first, I feel like this week I need to dive in to see exactly what Epic's service is, because I can't imagine that they've got it free and it's doing all of the same stuff, because eventually you get to some point and some scale where like they're not going to want to free host a bunch of AAA games. Maybe they are, and they're just burning through cash to do it, or nobody's doing it. But I can't imagine like you get to the super large scale where you're running thousands of servers and it's still free. Maybe they just offer a different type of or set of services that I haven't looked through that are all free. But I wanted to note that a lot of the Unity stuff I've been playing with and using all of them, and I haven't paid for any of them. It's all free up to this point. I don't know if they've added anything to the pro license or if they're going to. I think that that'd probably be cool if they do, if they haven't already. But yeah, it's been free for me, and it seems like it's free up to a pretty much up to like a production point, or maybe up to like the point where you're hitting like an open beta on your game. The numbers seemed pretty high. It'd be hard to get to a paid value. But I don't know the difference. Have you guys played with the Epic stuff at all? Do you guys have any thoughts on this? Know anything about Epic's online services? I wish Yori was here. Well, maybe we'll talk about this one next week. I'm going to do a little bit of research. If anybody in chat knows more about it, though, let me know, too, if there's anything I should specifically dive into, because I just can't imagine that they could offer the same thing for free completely without it just being a giant loss center, because you got to pay for all those servers and stuff. You know, once you get to the scale, at least. And then, let's see, there were a couple more questions down here. We actually stopped getting questions a while ago. I think when I said I had like 40 questions, people stopped submitting new ones, probably assuming that none of their questions were going to get answered. There was a VR question I was thinking about popping up. Jason, did you see that one earlier that Aaron asked? And maybe you have an answer to it. It's somewhat technical and kind of curious. It says, what would be a good approach for making NPCs able to do things like blocking a melee attack in VR? Should I just use guard poses or try to use some real prediction? So imagine you're playing a VR game, you swing a sword, and you want your NPC to like not take damage or block. Outside of putting like a shield particle on them, you got any thoughts on this? Like, what would you do?
Yeah, so rather than give a very specific answer, I'm going to kind of go back to something we said earlier about efficiency and time. Something I love to live by is the fact that for everything that you do passively, somebody somewhere loves it and has dedicated months or years of their life to solving. So in the case of a problem like this, you can start from scratch and like try to figure this out. Or, and I guarantee you, because I've seen them myself, the VR industry is one that's sort of proving new ground. They're constantly trying to research new and more like interesting ways of doing things and how to make combat compelling in a place with no haptics and all this kind of stuff. So rather than try to like learn all of that yourself, find blog posts by prominent developers and games in that space. So Cloudhead Games have written articles on this. So many, I can't even think of them all. I've read at least 15 articles from different, like Leap Motion have written entire blog posts on how to make interactions compelling in VR. So rather than solve it yourself, find games that are popular in VR, look for their company and look for their blogs, and then read very detailed blog entries on how they approach it. The TLDR for my personal preference on this is, yes, I would do prediction. And then what I would do is I like the ghost sword approach personally, where you hit something and the physical object stays with the collision, but then you move through it. And effectively, if you go too far, it snaps. There's a lot of, I specifically saw that solution on the Job Simulator guys. They did a really good detailed blog on like 18 different ways they tried to do compelling picking up and physics and how that worked, and they came to conclusions, and I basically stole their answers, because why would I try to do it from scratch when these guys have spent months and months, that their core pillar of their game, they've researched it inside and out. I'm going to use their homework, right? So my short answer is I don't know what the best is right now. It's been a long time since I've done VR specifically, but don't reinvent the wheel. Find smart people who've spent a lot of time on it and steal their homework.
I think that's really good advice. That's what I would do. Those blog posts and some of their videos and talks were really good too, though the ones you're talking about specifically from the Job Simulator guys. So it looks like we're at the finals of the battle here. We got Sean, the Wolf Berserker, versus Sam, the Wizard Sunflower, I guess, to see who wins the 1-year JetBrains license, or it's a rider license. I guess technically I think it applies to anything on there, but I would recommend that you take the rider key or use it for rider. It looks like the Wizard Sunflower is destroying the Wolf Berserker. It wasn't even close. So congratulations, Sam. Just shoot me an email, jason@game.courses, and I'll send you over that code soon. Sometime this week, maybe today. So yeah, congrats, and let's close that window now. That we're big again. Cool. So I wanted to take maybe one more question before we wrap things up. Is there anything specific you guys wanted to answer or jump into? Oops, I hit the chat overlay button.
New comments will display there.
Yeah, that's because I hit the button. If not, then I can just pick one at random.
Well, I feel like I'm monopolizing airtime anyway, so I think I'll let other people pick stuff.
Yeah. Was there anything you guys wanted to answer real quick?
Nothing that I can remember.
I'm gonna see if there's anything I want to answer. Oh, here. How do you master Unity? You can sign up for my courses down below. They're in the description.
Easy.
And just build games. Build games. Get out there and start putting things out there in front of people, and experience and practice is really the best thing to do. So somebody was asking where they can go for their finite PBR needs. Is there a place to go for ones that aren't infinite?
Yeah, you can just Google stuff and download them illegally. You'll get one use out of it. They'll do one thing. Actually, in a way, if you think about it, most of the character stuff on the asset store is very finite, and is not infinite. So if you want infinite stuff, you've come to the right place here. But and Nature Manufacturers infinite stuff, I would say as well, because of what you can do with it, and you can go crazy and do anything you want. But finite stuff, just look for a character or something that is stuck, then you're set.
And if they need the infinite one, you got the tree is still on sale, and then there's also the mega bundle that I need to go grab. That's got the Nature Manufacturer, the lava set. I think I have this one on another account though. I might, unless you have a different lava set. I think I have this one on a corporate account.
This is the newer one. We have older one, and there will be new one this year also.
Oh, okay. I might have the old one, or I might have. I'm not sure. Or I get too many Unity accounts. It gets to be confusing. I definitely need to grab this bundle though. I pretty much grab every bundle though. They're always good deals. So that's linked down in the chat, and we'll put it in the description as well. And then I guess I'm gonna close this window out and just ask everybody to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, share the stream, and drop comments down below if you have questions, things that you're curious about, things you want us to talk about next week, or thoughts on the stuff that we said. Said something stupid, drop a comment down below and let us know, and we'll see you again next week. Any other final words, guys?
I'll be going live in about 15-20 minutes. Gonna eat some quick lunch, and then I'll be live streaming my game dev journey.
And I will be over there watching. That's dropped in the description and in the chat as well. So click over to it and come join. I'm going to be hanging out watching, probably from my laptop in bed, talking to Andrew while I write some more code. Oh,
nice.
Anything else, guys?
Yeah, I mean, just go check out the Turbo Makes Games YouTube channel. I just put up a video the other day making this cool like buff and debuff system in Unity ECS. So had a lot of fun with that. It's kind of more of like an intermediate dots and ECS type one, but if you're a little bit more beginner to dots and ECS, maybe check out the stream that I did with Ruben a couple weeks ago. It's a super interesting one. We basically created like a LOD system for this game that he was making for a client. It's just a regular Unity mono behavior game, but we are able to build in this simple little LOD system using dots and ECS. So I think that'd be a good introduction for people if they're interested in that.
I actually watched that when you guys were live. That was another one I watched from bed.
Yeah. I think I popped in for hello myself.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
I guess if we're doing the self-promotion, I don't do it very often. Yeah, I have a YouTube channel of my own. It's still a little bit sparse, more so than I'd like, but life gets in the way sometimes. So my YouTube channel is just my name, Jason Story. If you like that kind of content and the way I rant about things, feel free to visit my Ko-fi page as well. And if you donate even just a minimum amount, you'll get access to the Discord. It's a private Discord, but there's a bunch of us. We talk about games and development, and you can ask questions there. So that's where you'll find me most of the time.
And that description is, or that is linked down in the description and chat. And we may as well finish with the beautiful art assets.
If anyone needs any nature assets or lava assets, or especially if you're building bigger games in Unity with open world, you can use our world streamer. There's a link in the chat.
Yeah, that's linked in the chat and in the description too. I got them all down there. Go check them all out. And then again, just make sure you hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, share, and come back and see us next week. Oh, let me drop Jason Story's YouTube channel in here. What did I do? I missed that. Jason Story YouTube. You know, what's funny is that I do exactly what everybody else does, and I just start typing it into Google and let it autocomplete.
I admit, the amount of times I've wrote Jason Weimann into the search box is very funny. It autocompletes every time now.
Yeah, I always just start typing. I'm like, I hope it's got my autocomplete right. So, all right, it looks like we are good. We'll see you all next week. Thanks again for coming out. Thanks for hitting the thumbs up button and sharing the stream and all that stuff. And goodbye.
Bye, everyone.